Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Sharyar's Voice. And today I have with me a very special guest who recently again came into the limelight through his latest book. But businessman, real estate developer, media mogul, son of the former governor, Shahbaz Taseer is here today with us. So let's just begin. How are you, Shahbaz? How are you doing? How's Lahore?
I'm very well, but that was too kind an introduction.
Nahi, it's so the thing is like with you and your story, like obviously during the captivity and when you came back, it was you were in the media for a while and then 3 4 years thoda silence tha, you got back to your life. And lately the book by right and everyone just came back to UK. Okay, we need to talk to this guy again. And recently I was in Karachi, so my sister finished the book and she gave me the book and she's like, "आपको ये पढ़नी चाहिए and you'll really love it." And I haven't finished it yet. Like disclaimer, मैं कोशिश कर रहा था कि मैं खत्म कर लूँ podcast से पहले, but I couldn't. But before we talk about the book, I just wanted to talk about your early life, like growing up in Lahore. How was it? How was it being part of that political family, and then eventually going on to the next stage of your life?
um, so I have to be honest. Growing up in Lahore was amazing for me, and I didn't grow up per se thinking I was part of a political family. Um, but I knew my father was a very influential person. But when I was growing up, he wasn't really, in the early '90s at least. He gave up politics and he joined business. And I would, but wherever I would go, whether if I was in school, my teachers would say, "Oh, you're Salman Taseer's son. Your father is, and would tell me a story about my father." And it was always involved with helping someone. I faced this problem and I met your father, and and he helped me. And wherever I would go, and as I was growing up, from school, you go into university and you start working, and then you meet professional people. And I have a real estate business. Actually, I'm not a media
Yeah,
mogul. That's my brother.
rather share.
He would be quite upset that I've taken this title from him. He works very hard for it. But having said that, as we worked and we met people in the professional world, older than us, I just came across so many people who would thank my father for their entire careers, and say, he gave us our start in business, not through politics. And so the political side of it wasn't, I would hear the stories of, how he fought against Ziaul Haq, how he spent time in solitary confinement. We would be lectured a lot about it growing up, to keep our privilege in check, because he was a self-made man, and he worked very hard so that his children could have a life that he never did.
Yeah,
And that doesn't, and but with most parents, especially desi parents, that they're quick to put you
yeah.
back in your place,
Put you on the pedestal. Okay, हमने
put
इतनी
you
मेहनत
back
की
in.
है and all.
So there's this very famous basketball player, Shaquille O'Neal. I'm sure you've heard of him. He's retired now.
Yeah,
He was like, one of the biggest basketball players when I was growing up. And he recently said something, and we read it as a family, and we just started laughing. And he basically said that, I told my kids that this is my money, not your money. Okay. And
yeah,
we just
yeah,
burst out laughing, because that's just the life that, we lived under my dad. And so, we saw his business personality, and that's what my brother and I wanted to be like. And I think my sister saw his media personality and the kind of man he was, and she wanted to be a journalist. And he had these very, very different sides of his personality. But I was exposed to the politician much later.
yeah,
When I was in my 20s is when he became governor, and I actually saw what he loved more
yeah,
than anything in the world, which was politics.
yeah. I think like even before when I was researching for this podcast, so I think like growing up, like I just turned 26 and I grew up in Pakistan. बहुत कम families होती हैं जिनके साथ you can like unfortunately, but if you associate tragedies with families, like growing up, the Bhuttos and like even the Sharifs, and like in the US they're like the Kennedys. But I feel like आपकी family in the recent past with Salman Taseer's, killing and the whole episode that followed, and then what happened to you. And it's more of a like your family now for the next 50 years. I think in Pakistan, if someone says, okay, someone from the Taseer family, but they would know कि ये हुआ आपकी family के साथ, like what happened with you and what happened with Salman Taseer sahab. Like it was.
Taking, I have to tell you something. Okay? What happened to my father was a tragedy for me. It was a tragedy for my mother. But what my father did was much bigger than us, my
Yeah,
family. Um, and I can't look at his death as ever as a tragedy. It's a tragedy for me, and it's a very deep scar. You know, no one. You're a young guy. I was your age when I lost my father, maybe younger.
yeah,
And I think if somebody loses their parent to old age or to illness or to life, as you see them grow older and things, that's easier to deal with. But for your father to be murdered is
it was
yeah, it's very traumatic. It's tragic. It's a huge tragedy, personal, family, for my family. But why he was murdered was his conviction, and what he wanted was not anything for me or my children. It had nothing to do with any worldly wealth or power or position, and it was just the simplest form. It's actually the simplest act, which is to help someone.
help
Um,
someone and for justice. I think I remember I wanted to share this with you. मैं winter vacation से like फैसलाबाद से हम लोग कराची land हुए and I left the airport and मैं कराची airport के बिल्कुल वो taxi वाली जगह पर हम लोग जा रहे थे. I was a kid and we saw the news and my father just told me कि Salman Taseer को गोली लग गई है कुसा market Islamabad में. And I was a kid. I was not supposed to have that memory now, but I'm 26 now and I have that memory. I know exactly what happened. हम घर गए घर जाके हमने news देखी. But I think that's what your book also is. Your book represents the collective trauma that Pakistanis have. Like you're obviously older than me, but uh, हमारी जो generation है, like I saw Benazir's killing. I was 9 years old. I saw Salman Taseer and the events that followed, the bomb blasts and the terrorism and the killings. And हम अपने आप को बहुत underestimate करते हैं, but all of us, like in our 20s and 30s and 40s, are carrying the trauma with us because we saw all of this at like 9, 10 years old, 11 years old, and this is something जो
I
हम
think
कभी भूल नहीं सकते.
no, it's also something that isn't talked about. Whenever I'm speaking to people in abroad and conferences and stuff, I always mention this that I think there's no scale that you can measure or weigh what this country, and we have a very young population, and so many of us have been affected by this war and by terrorism and by the politics of this country. And, and it's crazy. It's like
It's
you're 26, and I actually was speaking to a couple of Lums kids who are like 19, 20, like a generation behind you,
my
and
juniors,
even they
yeah,
had, yeah,
yeah,
and they had these memories, and they were
yeah,
like, these are some of our earliest memories.
and that's
And even for myself, man, like I was 17 when the trade when the planes crashed, and
I
I
heard
was
about
18.
that. उस पे मैं हाँ, that was my next
Yeah,
segue as well. So I am a huge Muru fan, like for the audiences. So आपकी जो पहली podcast है with Muru,
I'm
with
a
your
huge Muru fan.
yeah. So you had your other friend from Aegison as well there, and वो पहली podcast थी, and then the second podcast. So while I was researching for this episode, मैं पिछले 2 दिन से ना Muru के podcast, एशिया सोसाइटी वाला वजाहत सईद खान वाला इंटरव्यू सारा मैंने लाइक पढ़ा ना क्योंकि आई हैड फिनिश द बुक तो मुझे लगा मुझे अपनी रिसर्च तो करनी है एंड आई एम आल्सो मीडिया स्टूडेंट सो आई लाइक लव लाइक हियरिंग पॉडकास्ट एंड एवरीथिंग. So you told us about this story, like you told in the Muru podcast कि जब आपके साथ वो US में you were like taken away from the
Yeah,
airplane, I suppose, and you're like,
I've
I'm the
lived a
son
very
of the
like
government. Yeah.
it's
जी जी.
it's like it's not like a James Bond life. It's like a criminal. I've lived like
Yeah.
a life of a criminal.
Yeah, but then again, I think एक सवाल जो मैंने आपसे पूछना था, because I grew up in Karachi, but लम्स के साल मैंने लाहौर में गुजारे, and you were part of that, what we say, unfortunately or fortunately, the Lahore elite, right? Like you were the person in Lahore to
Why is
go
it
to.
unfortunate?
Like
Why
मतलब
do you?
उसको थोड़ा हम लोग थोड़ा ट्विटर पे ट्रोल भी करते हैं, डिमोनाइज भी करते हैं कि लाहौरीज तो ऐसे होते हैं, लाइक इन दैट वे. बट यू वर समवन ग्रोइंग अप जिसके साथ अगर किसी को पार्टी करनी है, चिल करना है, वो उसके लिए प्रिविलेज होगा कि ओके आई एम लाइक चिलिंग विद शहबाज तासीर और आई एम इन दैट सर्कल, राइट? लाइक एंड आई
Wow.
रिमेंबर लाइक
No one's
मतलब
ever said that to me.
like when
That's
I
cool.
was, yeah, when
Don't
I was
stop.
in
Continue.
yeah, when I was in Lums, I remember I had a friend who visited your place, I think, or a couple of friends who were there at some at your place or something. There might be an event where you were there as well, and other people were there. Maybe Shayar was there as well, and वो Lums में आके हमें बता रहे थे यार हम उस event में गए, वहाँ वो Shahbaz Taseer was there and everyone was there. मतलब in at least in Lahore के terms में your family was the family, right? Like Business Plus ke owners and the newspaper and the real estate, and everyone knows you. And then, like, this is I'm talking about before the killing, before Salman Taseer's killing, murder, and then your kidnapping. Usse pehle tak ka jo journey hai. So you were like this safe, very successful, very extremely successful business family of Pakistan. Like I remember, I was in school और मेरे डैड मुझे business plus दिखाते थे. You should know कि stock market में क्या हो रहा है, news में क्या हो रहा
Yeah.
है, and it's a very
That's why my
non-political.
father opened it.
Yeah,
That's why he wanted that. He wanted young people to get business
yeah,
education for free. A lot of the compliments are really nice. By the way, I wish
yeah.
my wife would hear some of them. But having said that, a lot of the businesses that Abba did was to actually give a platform to people where they could access knowledge. He really believed in this. World Call was the foundation of it,
World
bringing
call. I
internet
suppose
and
KPMG is also Hadi Tasir and Co. Right? Is
yeah,
it
yeah.
still the same?
It used to be Tasir Hadi, and
Yeah,
KPMG actually bought it over. I think this is when Abba decided to sell his businesses and move to Pakistan and fight Ziaul Haq.
yeah.
So, and then he started his life again in the 90s. So, he struggled for 12, 14 years, and he built a very good name for himself. And he was in his, late 30s, early 40s. So to have built a name for yourself in
Something like
business,
that. Ji.
yeah,
And
that's a huge achievement.
I suppose he was also, if not the first, one of the first few chartered accountants of Pakistan. Like, I think,
Well, I mean, he was the first he was four when Pakistan was made. So, three
yeah,
or four. So,
yeah, he
the
was that
first generation.
generation. Yeah,
Yeah, he was that generation. But, I will tell you one thing. He was one of the first people to do the exam in the first go. And that's
oh,
very difficult. Usually you're expected to fail once or twice. It's
yeah,
normal, but he couldn't fail once. He had nothing. And his entire life banked on passing that exam. And throughout my life, whenever Abba would tell me about trials and tribulations, he would tell me about that exam and the time he spent studying for it from the age of about 16 to 19. And he said those were the hardest 3 years of his life. And he put his head down and worked, and he lived on one Mars bar a day. And then when he started making a little bit of money from the bookkeeping, because that's what accountants do, he added a little bit of milk in his diet. But one Mars bar at that age was enough to see him through the day, and tap water, and like बहुत basic YMCA में he used to live. So not even basic accommodation, but below basic, and in England, and it's very tough. It was very
yeah,
tough in the 60s and 70s.
yeah.
But he did
But
it, and
his story is like, yeah,
yeah, he came from nothing. So, when you say that we were this family, and it's very nice, but like the elite, or, the real rich people of Pakistan, they don't necessarily love
they,
us
yeah,
because,
yeah,
okay, then our 50 cents is, they say I'm new money, I have no chance,
yeah.
I came up fast. So it's like that.
There's this
But
also, yeah, categorization in Pakistan है कि ये नए अमीर हुए हैं, ये पुराने अमीर हैं, like
yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
मैं इस तरह तो नहीं देखता.
yeah,
मैं आपको बताता हूँ कि मुझे ये एलीट और इसका इतनी वो परवाह नहीं है, और पैसे, और मेरी फैमिली की एक बहुत फर्क लेगेसी है. माय ग्रैंडफादर वाज अ पोएट.
yeah,
His name was Mohammed Deen Taseer, and he was the principal of Islamia College, and he was a great man, and he wrote wonderful poetry, and he's one of the renowned poets of Pakistan. And his best friend was Faiz Ahmed Faiz.
yeah,
Faiz Ahmed Faiz is like the most renowned poet in Pakistan, and they both married sisters, who's my dadi and my khala dadi. So Faiz Ahmed Faiz's wife was my dadi's sister, and so this is the home that my father grew up in. Influenced by, he was very young when he lost his father, but Faiz Ahmed Faiz influenced him.
Yeah.
And growing up, this was his life. He sat in Mia Iftikharuddin and Mia Salli, and some of the big historic names, the editors of the Pakistan Times and the owners, and sit in these halls as a young orphan boy, learning and wanting to be someone. And this is actually, and then growing up himself, he set benchmarks so that this family would have a name. The first was to educate himself and get a job. Then he wrote a book. He made a business that is a legacy, and it's something that the old families and the families that were handed things, and the seven families wo jo kehte hain Pakistan ki, and then the
22
elites that
families,
came,
yeah, initially
yeah,
seven, and
whatever, yeah, and how they split, and then the new couple of other names came up, and he didn't believe in any of this. He didn't want to be part of this culture. He didn't believe in the lives that they lived, how they brought up their children. So we grew up, instead of toys, we grew up in museums and in art galleries, and it is a privilege, by the way. It's a very unique privilege to be able to do this. But besides having the privilege of going to these places, what mesmerized me in my childhood was I never needed a guide in a museum, because my father knew every painting, every pillar of every city, of every story of, from the from times of you can't Peloponnesian wars, and God knows how far back human history went, and he knew every artifact and the artist behind it and the mind behind it and the Renaissance and the thought process, and that's what we built us, and that's what we wanted. So when I got the opportunity of not just being sitting behind a desk and living that life that I was born into, kind of, I wrote this book, and so sometimes like you said earlier, kid, this tragedy is associated with your family. My father died for something much bigger,
yeah,
than myself or any individual, and he left, and his name is timeless. It'll be there as long as this humanity progresses in these societies and in this timeline. His name will always come up when you speak about human rights, when you speak about sacrificing your life to help someone. And that's such an amazing thing. That is a conversation where Gandhi and Jinnah and Nelson Mandela and great men and great women, to be in that conversation is an achievement for him. So I can't look at his death as a tragedy. He's
it's
created a legacy
yeah,
beyond what we could imagine. And then my kidnapping, it made me a completely different. I have my trials, and I had a very difficult time, and God help me, I don't want to do it again, nor do I recommend it to anyone, as a life lesson. But the truth is that it's not a tragedy for me. It's the most amazing opportunity. I have got to travel across the world and meet wonderful people, and be grateful every day, for this amazing
for
life that I
this
have
life.
and a second
Yeah,
chance at it. And so I don't look at it as a tragedy. I think we're so blessed, and we're just so lucky. Allah ने हमारी दुआ इस जिंदगी में सुनी है यार. कितने लोग ये कह सकते हैं, कितने, so many people pray and say that our prayers have been unanswered for years. So many people lose relatives, so many people lose this and that, and Allah gave me everything. And so there's nothing tragic about my life. I had a very tough time, and a very hard experience, a very violent experience. But God gave me the strength to overcome that too,
this is
and I'm a better man.
yeah, like even when I was going through a podcast with Thori Si Jo maine I went through the book as well. I think what you represent now, the post coming back into the 2.0 Shahbaz, what do you say with Muru as well? Ke Shabby T was someone else and Shahbaz Taseer is someone else. Like, I think you represent
By the
like
way, in the first podcast, what you saw was probably Shabby Tea, and
yeah,
second podcast
yeah,
was Shahbaz
because I
Taseer,
think you
because
have
I got a
finished.
lecture from everyone.
Yeah, and like I remember somewhere you also mentioned ke you during your captivity, उसमें हम आते हैं captivity में बाद में, but what I wanted to say was what you represent is basically our state, which we call Pakistan, because like it's been like we had our golden days and we had our ups and downs. When the last 20 years, the post 9/11 era, anyone who any Pakistani who makes it to the world or who's famous, who's successful and who's popular, and if he grew up in Pakistan, we know that we grew up with like bomb blasts and terrorism and so the other day I was telling all of my friends that I'm gonna interview you, and they were like Indian friends and Pakistani friends and some other friends, and they were like, "यार, मतलब मैंने देखा है कि you guys generally talk about like bomb blasts and all of this like in a very like casual manner, like अच्छा यार वो वहाँ bomb blast हो गया." And yeah, and I grew up in Karachi. 2010, 2011, आज 25 बंदे मर गए, आज 30 बंदे मर गए. This दिन it was like
That
40.
Benazir, when Mohtarma came to Karachi when she landed, I think
the,
that
the
was
Karsas bombing.
yeah,
and
that
and
was
and even when the Benazir thing happened, when the Pindi blast happened, I
yeah.
still remember I was
I remember it. I
I,
remember it
I
like
I was in Y Block लाहौर और मैं नेक्स्ट में शॉपिंग कर रहा था एंड मेरी फुप्पो की कॉल आई कि फौरन घर आ जाओ कि बेनजीर अच्छा उस वक्त इट वाज लाइक बेनजीर को
yeah.
गोली लग गई है एंड I was what like 10 years old, and I was telling it to my Indian friends the other day that 10-year-old shouldn't remember these memories like यहाँ पे
Yeah,
like
no, it's
yeah
you know, yeah, no, we've been through a lot this country. And by the way, you would be surprised in the line of work that I'm doing related to this book and the kind of people that I sometimes meet. It's insane. Yeah, you won't believe it. Regular people who've been affected by this, who've seen death, who've seen blasts, who've lost family members, kidnappings, just a 10-year war is a long
yeah
war. It's long, and 2002 till 2014
2013 14 until Serbia Azov
में तो military operation
हाँ
शुरू हुआ था. I
हो
was
गया
there.
था
हो गया था, yeah, and अभी भी यार it's still there. You know,
it's
you've
still
got
there and हम इसके बारे में इतनी बात नहीं करते like I think we try to just brush it aside even when we are abroad like हमारे यहाँ पे when we are like with our people from other nationalities we just try to like keep it under the rug but we should
yeah,
talk
because
about it.
it's really painful. Yeah, you know, the thing is that like look at me, look at yourself. You know, do I look like I care about a militant, or you know, you don't look like you're even vaguely conservative. I mean, let
Yeah
alone an extremist. Okay. And generally, you know, the problem is that because we're Muslim, we're conservative by nature. This is the country that we've grown up
yeah
in.
yeah
Then we're born in a conservative culture, in a conservative religion, in a conservative country that's also suffering from extremism and militancy and, you know, a very harsh political environment, which is sometimes military, sometimes civil military, sometimes civil against military. I mean, it's, you know, complete chaos. And then we're profiled as soon as we go abroad. Like, you know,
exactly
I
yeah
haven't slept in 2 days, and God help me if it was 10 days. If I, you know, a Spanish guy has the privilege of growing his beard for 3 months without a problem and
yeah
traveling across Europe. But, you know, a Pakistani doesn't. I have to be clean shaved when I hit the immigration
yeah
airports. Yeah, I have to look a certain way. I have to talk a certain way. You know, everything has to be decent, and I'm questioned and asked. I am today, Shahbaz Taseer is today pulled into those special security checkups all the time, yeah. Every single time.
and
My wife,
you're like you are a privilege, you're the 1% of the country like if
dude,
we
it's
look at
not
that.
even that. It's even funnier than this. My wife is Ukrainian, and traveling with me, she saw me profile, and she was like getting angry. And I was like, what are you getting so worked up about? She's like, I've never seen this in my life.
It's just
I just burst out
yeah
laughing. And I was like, dude, don't create a scene in the airport. They'll ship me off to Guantanamo Bay because you want, you know, to fight for civil rights. I couldn't care less. This has been happening to me since I was like 16, 17, man. But the truth is that imagine she's much younger than me, and she's half Ukrainian, and she's not lived in Pakistan. And, you know, so she travels with me now, and she can't believe that, you know, they would just randomly pull me aside. But they haven't randomly pulled me aside. They have my passport details, they know exactly who I am. But they just, it's that final check, you know,
yeah
कि ये Pakistani hai. Yeah. So it's like an overwhelming burden no matter where we go. Like the first thing they'll ask us is about militancy. Yeah, are you crazy? I was just like chilling on a Saturday night, playing football on Friday, watching the Premier League on Sunday. I don't know what's happening in
It's
Waziristan, and I don't mean to sound entitled, but I am living a
but
regular life in this
exactly,
chaos.
and you're like, even a lot of us are like this. Like, it's not okay, we do have it's like all again the Pakistani mainstream periphery relationship, but majority of Pakistan and average Pakistanis, we're just like me and you, like, not to like profile someone, but this is what Pakistan is like. Like, I'm a Punjabi by ethnicity, but majority of us are like this, right? And I think all of us listening to this podcast as well, if we go abroad, like, I'm in the Netherlands for 2 years now, almost 2 years, but sometimes you do feel that na kabhi kabhi acha, you're like, for a lot of people, me being a Pakistani, they think of me as an anomaly, like you're just like the privileged
The,
0.1%.
but we're not.
But
We're
I'm
there are
not.
millions like us.
Yeah,
There are like millions and millions of people like us all over
exactly.
the world, and each one is made to feel like a 1%.
Like, I've had
You know
some of the
what I
most, yeah, I've had some of the most ridiculous कभी कभी सवाल होते हैं. Okay, if someone in the US, like southern Texas के बाद मुझसे कोई पूछे तो मैं मान भी लूं, but here, like, चलते फिरते, oh, but your English is so good, or yeah, you know brands. So my laptop has like a Beatles sticker and like a Brian Adams sticker. Like, and the other day, someone at work went like, "Do you listen to those songs in Pakistan?" I'm like, "Yes, we do." हम कोई मतलब नॉर्थ कोरिया में नहीं रहते, मतलब हम
Nobody
we're
listens to Brad Adams. What's
yeah,
wrong with you, bro?
yeah, we're part of the world. But yeah, sometimes you just and that's when I also question, okay, whether I'm well off like here or I'm better off in Pakistan as well. Not that I also had like a very privileged growing up in Pakistan, went to lums. I'm also part of that like certain elite. But the jitna hum log misrepresented and also as like a media and someone who studies propaganda, it's insane. It's insane the amount of misrepresentation that 250 million Pakistanis get like on a daily basis. Matlab, it's
Yeah, so you know something, I get this. So whenever I'm giving an interview abroad, right, they'll always say that how did you feel about the reaction to your father's murderer, being thrown petals on and being showered like this. And I'm like, yeah, meri baat suno. There are 220 million people in
exactly,
Pakistan. If a
exactly.
100,000 psychopaths are shown on TV and 40 lawyers are throwing flowers and there are like 100,000 people on the streets, is this a representation of 250 million people? Acha, I was just speaking in Bradford, so I asked him this, my friend who'd organized it. I just asked him because there was a TLP protest happening over there, and they were actually chanting hate speech, like वो एक पूरे सेक्ट को काफिर कह रहे थे, शियास को काफिर कह रहे थे. And I just looked at my friend and I was like, yeah, you bring me over here to talk about extremism in my society. You think these are Pakistani? They might be of Pakistani origin, but this is
Yeah.
England. This upbringing is England. This is from your communities and your societies and your laws. And so just because it's my religion, you think that Pakistani Muslims
Yeah.
should be profiled like this. This is a societal problem, yeah. And
and
this
and
spreads like wildfire.
we all know England has that problem. England, even in modern day Britain, you find certain segments of that society, maybe of South Asian origin, who hold views like that, who confirm, but again, they can't be वो इतना open नहीं हो सकते because again, they love their British passports more than they love their like views.
Yeah,
But
but these TLP guys were local British passport
yeah,
holders who were
yeah,
chanting crazy stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
I've never heard stuff like this,
You
and
don't
I
hear
was
stuff like this in Pakistan as well. Like in majority of where we grew up, like Karachi, Lahore में कोई इस तरह चलते फिरते नहीं बोल रहा होता. But you find those
हाँ
elements.
मैंने तो देखो अब I can't sit here and tell you that I've never seen a terrorist, but really till I
Yeah,
never saw a terrorist, I've never seen a terrorist.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
but but again, like this I don't even know I have an argument by the way, but the truth is that like मेरे भाई को देखो, सही है, he's lived in the city his whole life. Unfortunately, besides his father's murder, and I mean we've been personally affected, but he's never even seen a rally. I'm
yeah,
being honest with you. So, and they're modern Pakistanis, they're liberal Pakistanis, they're conservative Pakistanis, they're artists, they're socialists. You will
musicians,
find communists,
sportsmen.
musicians, as far. There are people from all walks of life. The problem is the burden of profiling.
Yeah.
And I travel a lot, so I mean I've met security lines keep profiling. I've sat for hours in queues with my father being governor in America, answering immigration officers ke questions while showing a official passport.
Yeah,
Okay,
you
so
you you
like
mentioned this in Muru's podcast as well. कि I have
yeah,
an official passport, and yet they're like, and they question you, okay, do you mean diplomatic passport? And you're like, no, official passport. Yeah,
yeah.
it's
And I
just
was
that.
arrested. I was
Yeah.
arrested on suspicion of trying to blow up
And
and
when like Senator Kerry is like distributing flood relief with your father, which is basically how dumb the Americans are, like not
But do you
defending
know
you.
what's scary?
Yeah.
People think that they're dumb. I'm lucky that they are, that they made a mistake. I'm lucky. Shahbaz Taseer is lucky that they made a mistake. Because if Shahbaz Taseer's father was not the serving governor of Punjab and distributing aid with Senator Kerry, a guy accused of trying to blow up a commercial airliner
वो
is
तो
not free in one day.
yeah,
You,
definitely.
you, you know what I mean? So
Definitely.
I swear to God, if my privilege ever saved me in my life, it was in the US when I was arrested. And
Yeah.
if my privilege ever killed me, it's when they kidnapped me for being a kafir. So I've been arrested for being a terrorist, and I've been kidnapped for being a kafir. It's just unbelievable.
It's just it's the irony of it all. Like
But
as
I'm
I
a very
said,
proud Pakistani Muslim, by the way. I have to
yeah,
tell you this.
like the and you represent the kind of struggles and the kind of contradictions like we grew up in, because again we are relatively a very new
Just
country.
social. I mean,
Yeah,
I come, privileged
yeah,
family. My parents have worked very hard for me to just face no difficulty except getting kidnapped for 5 years and
yeah.
surviving. This is
But
like, but another overwhelming burden in my life.
again, as a segue, agar if we move on to your captivity years, like if you read the book, and for those who haven't read or जिन्होंने पढ़ी है अभी तक, it's a story. It's also a story of hope. वो तो अपनी जगह है. It's that the underlying thing. But it's also a story of how you navigated those 5 years. Because आपके जैसा या even मेरे जैसा कोई born and raised in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, well educated, successful person, अगर वो मतलब I तो even remember, like I've been to like the tribal areas bordering Peshawar दो तीन दफा दोस्तों के साथ. Like अगर आप खैबर चले जाओ या लंडी
I've
कोतल
never,
चले जाओ. Like I've been there as a child. Like अभी 2 years ago I went to Islamabad, so I just wanted to take a solo trip. So I called my friend in Mardan. I'm like मुझे ना tribal areas जाना है. Like and he's like चलो. So like I took a solo trip to लंडी कोतल. And मैं वहाँ पे एक दिन, ओके आई एम प्रिविलेज, बट फॉर एवरीवन आई नो माय फ्रेंड्स, हम वहाँ पे एक दिन तो क्या तो कुछ घंटे नहीं गुजार सकते. हम वहाँ पे चाय पी लेंगे, इंस्टाग्राम स्टोरीज बना लेंगे, चेक इन डाल देंगे खैबर पास का, एंड हम बस वापस पेशावर या कैंट चले जाएंगे, इस्लामाबाद चले जाएंगे. लाइक दैट्स व्हाट हु वी आर लाइक. एंड समवन लाइक यू स्पेंडिंग 4.5 years, लाइक आपके 3 साल मीर अली में गुजरे, फिर कुछ टाइम आपका शवाल, और फिर जब आपने अपने आप को बेसिकली इम्पर्सनेट किया अंडर दी व्हेन यू वर विद द अफगान तालिबान अंटिल योर इवेंचुअल रिलीज, you went through a journey of your own. And मुझे बस थोड़ा सा उसके बारे में पता करना था, because I know a lot of people who would have just given up, like this is the end. Like it's
yeah, and
amazing.
the thing is that find better travel destinations, by the way, when you're
Yeah,
with your friends
I
and you
I
do
just
solo
wanted to
trip.
I just wanted to visit Khyber Pass. So I was doing a thing. I wanted to go to every place which is on the Pakistani currency notes. So Islamic College Peshawar and Khyber Pass were like one of our. Like it was just like a thing I did.
That's cool. Actually, I'm gonna look into doing something
It's
like
a
that.
very nice
So
and
I've
I
been to Peshawar.
yeah,
I've been to Peshawar before, but I've never been. I've been Aptabad side as well, and I've
yeah,
been to Kalam and Swat and
yeah.
Gilgit and Hunza, and I've traveled across the north. I've been to the Khundra Pass, which is the border with
Those are
China.
like the touristy destinations. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been from the Aptabad side as well, and
yeah,
I've been from this side, and of course Nathia and Mari and
yeah,
the north. I mean, I've traveled the north,
yeah.
but the tribal areas
Are
are unique. So they were unique in the 90s, they were unique in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s. They're very like they're self-governed until actually the insurgency started in with Afghanistan. They were self-run. एंड हमारी वहाँ एक सेपरेट किस्म की फौजी डिवीजन थी जो उसको सुपरवाइज करती थी, बट वो ट्राइबल चीफ्स चलाते थे और वो रिलेटिव पीस में रहते थे। और अफगानिस्तान बेसिकली फ्रॉम द 70s टू द 90s, अर्ली 90s, लेट 70s, अर्ली 90s, we also house some of the
Yeah, we
more
did.
refugees than anybody else, right? We've got, I mean, not anybody else, but we've got a lot. We've got over 10
Yeah,
million or something. And they're not Afghan. I mean, they were Afghan, but now they've lived 40, 45 years in Pakistan,
Pakistan.
and so 3, 4 generations unki jo bhi hai are Pakistanis. They have Mahajir cards, right? And so, anyways, it's a very difficult area. It's a completely underdeveloped area, and it's been run by tribal chiefs. जब militancy उस area में आ गई, so just imagine, anyways, a very basic place just being completely destroyed. Then with
Yeah,
an ongoing military operation, it's also an unlivable place. There's no running water, there's no electricity, there's no sewage. You're living in mud houses or in jungles or in, just on the run continuously. Me really was the most, I don't even know what the word is,
yeah,
but like settled time, I
yeah.
guess, that I can say that there was like a roof over my head, even though it was made out of straw. But when I was in Shabad, which is a valley, and उधर वो चलगोजों के दरख्त होते हैं, पाइन कोन के दरख्त. I didn't even know that पाइन कोन के अंदर चलगोजे होते हैं, by the way, till I was in Shabad. And there were days that we didn't have any food, so we would collect these pine cones and take the chulgozas out and make a little fire in the day because we can't do it at night, and cook them, and then have like these big bags of chulgozas that we picked ourselves. हमारी उंगलियां काली हो जाती, सही है, नाखून और उंगलियां, and make these big bags for ourselves and eat it. And हमारे पास dates होते थे और बड़ी basic, मतलब we had nothing. There's no bazaar. There's no, like एक बार उनको पहाड़ में बकरी मिली, उन्होंने उधर ही ज़िबा की, उधर ही उसको किया, खाया, पकाया, हमने खाया. What I mean? वरना हम dates और खजूर और चलगोजों पे थे, एंड पानी हमें मिल जाता था, because पानी तो आपको मिल जाता है, but
वो
natural पानी
चश्मे से
नहीं था.
भी वो लाइक चश्मा
हाँ, it was natural पानी. It wasn't like कि कोई, मतलब कुछ हमें कुछ पाइप मिल गया या tap water.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
this concept doesn't exist, right? And also you
yeah.
don't have a map, so you're not walking towards water. You're lucky if you find it. um and this is a crazy, like, कभी Bear Grylls देखी है?
नहीं, बेयर ग्रिल्स यानी मतलब द ग्रिल
He's
जो.
like this dude who drops himself in like wild wilderness and
हाँ,
survives.
probably, हाँ, I think YouTube पे I must have
Yeah,
like gone through it. हाँ.
just multiply that by 1,000 and drop the
नहीं,
world's
I can
weaponry on top.
imagine. I can. एक चीज, I think आपने अपनी कैप्टिविटी बारे में तो बहुत बात करी है on all the appearances, but like which like I won't recommend it to any 16, 17-year-old growing up in Pakistan, but I was like a huge journalism news, like I'm like too much into news. I've been trying to cut down on it. So
No,
I was
don't.
in,
That's a fantastic
yeah,
quality, by the way.
I
Like,
was in, yeah,
you
so
can never read enough and you can never learn enough.
yeah, 2014, I get done with my O-level last exam. I just fly off to my friend in Islamabad and he takes me to Peshawar. And I'm buying वो कप्तान चप्पल जो पिशावरी चप्पल अब कप्तान चप्पल हो गई है in near कारखानो बाजार where they used to sell NATO का सामान. And we get the news के ऑपरेशन ज़रबे अज़ब स्टार्ट हो गया है, या उन दिनों में मतलब there was a time जब उन्होंने F-16 भेजना शुरू कर दिए थे ट्राइबल एरियाज में,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
was जो
Everybody
पहले
did.
नहीं होता था. Probably I think early मुशर्रफ के टाइम पे गनशिप्स जाते थे, बट आई वाज इन पेशावर.
Helicopters.
हेलीकॉप्टर्स जाते थे जब मुशर्रफ पे अटैक भी हुआ था 2002 2003 में. देयर वाज लाइक ब्लो बैक फ्रॉम द स्टेट. But I kind of started monitoring the war on terror, and as a LUMS kid, A levels LUMS kid उसके दौरान, and I kind of used to see कि यार उन एरियाज के अंदर हमारी अपनी स्टेट की कितनी प्रेजेंस है. बट व्हाट यू टॉक अबाउट इन द बुक मीर अली के बारे में, I used to think कि ऑपरेशन से पहले भी there was some semblance of the Pakistani state there, pockets होंगी of the militants. But आपकी बुक पढ़ के थोड़ा सा ये लगता है कि until ज़रबे अज़ब मीर अली was like मतलब खुला खाता था वहाँ पे, मतलब like they're like Turks,
Not just
Russians.
me, really, Meransha as well.
Yeah,
And Data Khail and a few of these cities, 4 or 5 cities, even Shabal, these were all basically, and the route into Afghanistan. So there are about 10 towns and cities. I don't know what you want to call them. They're not cities, right? Like Middle is not a city,
it's like
but it had about 1 million people living there, or 5 lakh people living there back in the day when I was there. So, and Miranshah was bigger than me really, and Data Khel was smaller than the two of them,
But
and
there was
Shawal was
no
like,
presence of like
no, so there was a big military
FC.
camp in Mirali.
Yeah,
There was a
yeah.
big military camp in Miranshah, and there was a huge check post as well. And regardless of that, sometimes in the bazaar, जब कोई bombing, suicide blast होती थी कैंप पे या चेक पोस्ट पे या कोई ट्रक उड़ाते थे या कुछ करते थे, तो वो कर्फ्यू कॉल करते थे बाजार में, सही है, एंड टैंक आ जाती थी, और उन्होंने एक बार एक टैंक के ऊपर भी माइन लगाया. So like they would fight like camp के जाके like literally उनका एक declared संगर था where they would go like in shifts जंग लड़ने फौज के खिलाफ. So like they had like a battlefield as well. So it was like a complete, like, the thing is that if you live in Lahore, when you said F-16s, it's true. There's some things that I haven't talked about in a lot of my podcasts because I kind of, or interviews and stuff, because I don't like to, it's a bit insane. My torture and
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
war itself that I went through. It's very difficult, yeah, because like I'm very lucky कि मुझे उसका वो नहीं होता, but like when you talk about F-16s, yeah, I'll be honest with you, I don't think I've ever felt fear in my life. And I swear to God, I've been tortured. I've been buried alive. I've had flesh pulled out of my back, like chunks of it, like, and they tried to fry it and make me eat it. Okay. And I've had the most despicable shit that you can do. Sorry for my
नहीं
language,
नहीं
but
नहीं,
like
no no
the
worries, no
most
worries.
disgusting, like,
Yeah.
acts of brutality and violence that you can carry out on a living human being besides killing them, right? Whatever you can do to them um, has been done to me. Okay. And literally I've been torn apart by एक वक्त पे तीन तीन लोग मुझे मार के मेरे इस ये हाल करते थे कि I can't even tell you. And I've been through solitary, I've fought myself, I've been suicidal, I've been depressed, I've been angry, I've been resentful, I've run for my life from all kinds of war machinery. I've lived in conditions that are not even remotely fit for animals, let alone, if abroad you treated an animal like this, yeah, you'd have a police case open
Yeah,
against you.
yeah, yeah.
And and I swear to God, like, but when you say F, like a fighter jet, I have never felt fear in my life like I have running from fighter. You can't run, firstly, it's lucky to be
It's
alive.
you can't. It's
And
just
yeah,
it's
yeah, they're
such
just
an
not hitting you. That's the truth. Sometimes I say running and it sounds a little heroic. And I always tell people, by the way, there's very little heroism in my story. It's a lot of running and a lot of screaming and then just kind of
yeah.
making it home. Um, and the only amazing thing about it is a strength that's not my own, by the way. It's from Allah and from my father and my mother, because it's got nothing to do with me. And that is the strength that kept me sane through this time, because really I don't have it anymore.
नहीं,
And
it's fascinating and आपके थोड़े bits and pieces भी हैं. I want to talk about how you you talk about loneliness and you talk about the spider and Peter and even like Muru's
yeah,
podcast. But something else what I wanted to know was that you seem to have a very profound understanding of those areas which normal Pakistan, okay, you were in captivity those areas, but I feel like even from a captive's perspective, आपकी जो मीर अली और मेरा और जो आपकी knowledge about the networks है, okay, my kidnappers were from the IMU and there's the Afghan Taliban, there's the TPP, and you seem to have a grasp over those networks, which is basically essentially like counter-terrorism and understanding terrorism. And you did that through your years in captivity, which is वो जो मुझे बहुत interesting लगा और उस पे थोड़ी कम बात हुई है. How did you develop or you develop this like if a normal person is there, he's like just to hell with these guys. I don't want to study their networks now, right? I'm a captive, okay, I am. But अब मुझे इनके अंदर नहीं घुसना कि ये इस मूवमेंट का है और ये इस मूव but you did that. जो मुझे थोड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग लगा है मैंने सोचा मैं आपसे पूछूंगा like did you develop an interest?
actually, that is really, you're the first person to ask
Yeah,
me this.
yeah.
And it's amazing. I'm actually lost for words. But have you ever been in flux, or have you ever had to do something that you had absolutely no interest in, but your parents forced you to do it, or study it, or your teacher made you do something? And this is what my
I
knowledge on
I think
these
I
groups
did.
is.
हाँ नहीं I did probably academic side पे yes, but these kind of
It's
interests,
like math class.
yeah,
For me, it's
exactly.
like math. Uh,
Normal Pakistanis, they don't give a shit about all of this, although they're living through war.
Yeah,
But
I didn't either. I have to tell you something. just before Abba died, because while he was governor, वो Sri Lankan team पे भी attack हुआ था
जी,
Lahore.
वो भी एक हमारी कलेक्टिव ट्रॉमा का पॉइंट
Yeah,
है.
yeah, and so many more incidents. Yeah, in Model Town there was a bombing in
The
New
Wagah
Market,
border bombing,
Paga
APS,
bought APS, and
Benazir.
just
It's
right.
just
And
it's never
so
ending saga.
what? So after the Sri Lankan team, my dad told me that the worst of these guys, of these militants, are the Central Asians.
Yeah.
And I just, I had no understanding. And for me, you say the word Taliban, and it just sounds like a scary guy in a cave running from, US, a war on terrorism. And I had no interest in it. I had no understanding of it, by the way, as an adult. Like, I have to be really honest, even while this war was going on. And I had been profiled in the US as well. Like, like I'm talking about
But
the
you didn't pay that much
literally
heed
the
to
day
it.
I was
Yeah.
kidnapped, I had no idea except for the Afghan Taliban. मुझे ये कुछ नहीं समझ में आता था और कि कोई बैतुल्ला मसूद ने बेनजीर को मारा है और वो तालिबान ही है और पता नहीं क्या है. And Al Qaeda, of course, everybody knows because of Osama bin Laden. And his killing in Afghanistan is another part of our collective shame
Yeah.
and tragedy.
Yeah. It's never ending.
Trauma. Anyway, so the the problem was in my first 6 months of captivity, I had no idea of where I am and who the hell has me. I didn't even know if I was in I actually didn't think I was in Pakistan. I thought I was in Afghanistan. So when they told me I was in Mirali in Waziristan, I was like, oh my god, at least I'm in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And when they told me they were Central Asians, those words that my father had said to me in like 2010
They
or
just came back.
2009, they just came back like, oh my god, yehi mujhe milne the. So yeah, and then the rest of it I pieced together through conversations with my kidnapper because he was actually part of their intelligence. वो उनका जो इस्तखबारात का department था, like their ISI, he was like number 3 or number 4 in that department when he kidnapped me, and he was in charge of the terror cell of Lahore. So he actually ran their commercial operation in Lahore and had kidnapped 4 or 5 people before me and killed one of them. And he was a madman. He was just sadistic.
Is that Usman Basra? No, that was the
No,
go to
Muhammad
loyal
Ali. That's
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali.
That Muhammad
Yeah,
Ali.
Usman Basra got caught. Usman Basra was a Pakistani. Muhammad Ali was an Uzbek. So, yeah, so when I just, for the life of me, I had no interest in these guys. I didn't want to have any interest in them, and I really wanted to go home. But as the time went, and as I was conversing with these people, and it's the same thing about my faith as well. Everything that I learned about Islam, about my faith, about Allah, about the Prophet, about his companions, about what ayats from the Quran mean, all of this, Qiraat, recitation of Quran, learning of the language. I did all of this by myself. There was no one there to teach me. I learned it for myself because I believed that every word that I read from the Quran is forgiving my sins and will save my life. This is my belief, and I still believe it. If you're in trouble, if you're in pain, if you need help, just I can't I don't like to get I never like to tell people because pain is such a difficult thing to talk about. When you're feeling it, no matter what I say to you, you won't understand, right? You have to find your own meaning and your own way to vent it and to get over it. But for me, it was the best thing that I ever did for myself. It gave me, in a really dark time, a lot of hope and something to look forward to, and a belief that even if this life didn't work for me, the next will. And and both of these knowledges of this knowledge, whether it was my faith or whether it was the intricate workings of these groups, it came to me, one I really worked for, and the other one was kind of forced down, my head by this madman who liked to boast because he really believed. And by the way, it's not just him, all of them, every single one of them, in all their groups, no matter how many groups they are, what their operations are, where they are functioning, where they are living. They believe in the end that they will conquer and create this caliphate, and their ideologies are all linked to militancy.
Yeah.
And so it will be that ideology. And so far, the only successful people are ISIS, who have carved out a territory in Iraq and Syria. And you've seen what they implemented there. The Afghan Taliban are very different. To ISIS and to Al Qaeda and to the Pakistani Taliban, but they're also someone that the entire world has gone to war with over their ideology and their way of living. So, anyways, the more time also you spend somewhere and with
Yeah.
some people, it's not like I had access to Newton, and his laws of
Yeah.
physics and the intricate workings
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
the universe. I had very basic equipment. I had
Yeah.
this madman, and by the way, another thing that I've just quickly rushed over in my book is the conversations. So I mentioned how many conversations we had and how torturous those conversations are. But part of the torture of the conversations isn't just that he's the stupidest, most vindictive, evil man that I ever met, but also, how he would boast about the group, about how they would conquer Pakistan. He
They
believed,
conquered Rome as well, like in one of your
yeah, the Rome was after. पहले तो पाकिस्तान फतह
yeah,
होना था ना.
yeah.
पाकिस्तान तो कंफर्म बात. ये तो
पाकिस्तान तो
आपका
उनका
रोम तो
yeah.
नेक्स्ट था.
I feel
पाकिस्तान वाज
like
डन.
पाकिस्तान उनके लिए, सॉरी आपकी बात काट रहा हूँ, बट जो आपने भी 2-3 दफा मेंशन करा कि हमें वो किस तरह प्रोफाइल करते हैं, पाकिस्तान उनके लिए एक इनहेरेंट एनॉमली बन चुका है, क्योंकि इफ यू लुक एट देयर द ग्रेटर खुरासान एंड द एक्सटेंडेड अफगानिस्तान टाइप वाला जो पूरा सिस्टम, वो सुन्नी
या
सुपर स्टेट जो
एग्जैक्टली.
चाहते हैं,
गजवा हिंद.
एक मॉडर्न relatively Islamic republic which came into being through constitutional arguments is the antithesis of what those people essentially are. And even
Yeah.
in the Islamic world, matlab, I think the Arabs have come to the 21st century in the last 10 years. But Pakistan inherently was a very modern Muslim state, which back in the day, apart from, let's say, Turkey or Pakistan or maybe like Azerbaijan and all these countries, Pakistan is an anomaly for them. कि यार ये कैसे हो गया, ये मतलब parliament and like judiciary and Benazir Bhutto and Qaid Azam and अंग्रेजी बोलना and I think that's one of the fascinations of being a Pakistani, right? कि though हमारा identity crisis है, but the way we live to see another day is amazing, and that's, I don't know, like
Yeah.
I feel very proud about it. Okay,
No.
regardless of
We're big fighters, by the way. We're like,
yeah.
I have this friend who said you're like cockroaches. You just refuse to. You'd survive a nuclear blast. So I was like, well, that's part of the reason why we haven't gone with India is because I think they
Yeah.
believe that as well, that they'll survive a nuclear blast. But yeah, but
And
no, we're very resilient. I'm joking about it, but we are a very resilient people. It's also part of that collective trauma that you're talking about as growing up. Where 60% of us are below 30.
30, yeah.
Yeah, and that's like 150 odd million people that you're talking about here, and just imagine what their entire childhood is and what they're exposed to. There are very few countries in the world that have been exposed to this. There's Afghanistan, which is the most brutal and bombed and backwards, and then there's
There's
Iraq, which is a
Syria
more
and
moderate,
Yemen.
Syria, which is 2010. मेरे तो kidnapping के बाद सीरिया में शुरू हुआ,
हाँ.
right? Yemen तो मेरे आने के बाद शुरू हुआ, और Libya while I was gone शुरू हुआ. But Pakistan is, it's something like my father's generation also was traumatized by, like, his parents saw the independence of Pakistan and India,
Yeah.
and they were traumatized by that, the kind of death
Mm.
and violence that they saw in partition. My grandparents were traumatized by that. My father was traumatized by the political chaos and the military chaos, the military civil chaos in this country, his generation. And then my mother's younger generation than her, and she's just, again, never seen any stability in her years in this country. And then there's myself and what my generation has witnessed. I mean, and unfortunately, because of what's happened, my mother's had to digest all of this as part of her life and trauma, and whatever it is, part of her journey as well as a Pakistani. But it's just, it's too much, man.
It's too
It's
much. And but while I was reading your
By
book,
the way, we spoke about all these incidents when we didn't speak about Malala, and
yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
didn't, and even Shahbaz Bhatti, who was killed just a
Shahbaz
few days
Bhatti,
after.
Malala, Mashal Khan, abhi
Mashal
jo
Khan, the
recently what happened with that Sri Lankan factory worker. And I
yeah,
try not to talk about this. I try my best. A lot of friends here, some of my Pakistani friends are like, "Yaar, ab tum idhar ho, tum pad rahe ho, focus on your career and everything." I'm like, I just can't disassociate myself because I grew up like I was 10 years old and I used to watch Kashif Abbasi reporting on the Lal Masjid operation, and I was just into that whole scene. And I'm kind of proud about it because the contextual knowledge which
You know,
I
this
have.
country should apologize to its youth. I swear to God.
Yeah, you know,
Um,
I met
but
this.
for the news anchors, no offense to Kasha Basi, but
Yeah, but like
for
वो तो
for
बस
the
मेरी memory.
anchors and
Yeah, the memory में
yeah,
मेरे आ गया. I met a Pakistani journalist in Paris last year, and we were just talking about Pakistan and halat and everything. And he told me, do you remember Lal Masjid? And I told him the series of events कि अब ये arrest हुआ, ये army के उनको मारा. And he was like, dude, you're 10 years old. मतलब, how do you remember all of this? And I'm like, I don't know. I was always into this sort of scene. But एक
I
जो
was
मुझे
24
yeah,
when that
I was 10 years old. So I remember Lal Masjid
happened.
बहुत clearly. Then I remember Benazir. I remember uh, before APS. I remember the Sawat operation. I remember Malala
I
and all
heard
of it.
Malala on the radio over there, and these
Oh,
guys were celebrating, right? And and I had never seen anything anti-Malala till I came back here. So imagine I was over there and I heard about this little girl, and all the reports that I get about the little girl is from the BBC. So there's a very pro Malala thing, and her story is wonderful. And she used to write these little
diaries.
columns under an alias, and they were about education and they were about this and very brave columns. A girl from an area that is under militancy, there's an army operation there, there's a lot of problems in that area,
Yeah.
and then these militants come on your bus and they shoot you and you're flown out, and the next time you wake up you're like in Birmingham or something, and they've operated on you. Sorry.
No.
They've operated on you for days or months, or I don't know how long she was in intensive care. And you finally wake up and you're alive, and there are all these incredible opportunities that have opened up for you, and you get to have a education, and you get to go to Cambridge or Oxford where
The
she went,
Nobel Prize
the
and
Nobel Prize.
everything.
And
Yeah.
by the way, you don't just get it, right? You have to work really,
You have to
really,
work
really.
hard for it. You have to work hard for it.
Yeah.
And
You have to,
uh,
and working hard for a Nobel Peace Prize means, like, not just the fact that you got shot in the face, but now you have to get up. You have to become someone that is an international figure that people can depend and rely on and look to as an inspiration. And you have to take up human rights causes, enough causes that in the millions and millions of people in this world that are there helping people, you are considered the best and given this incredible honor, right?
well,
And then I
it's
come back here and I see people
and
abusing her. And I'm like,
it's just
the last people that I saw celebrating this were bearded militants who murdered children in Peshawar. How can you want to have anything in common with this mindset? What do you mean she's an agent? What do you mean she's made a name for herself? What else
it's
would you do?
just
Look at me. What do you think I did? I got kidnapped by the Taliban. I wrote a book about it. I'm doing interviews and promoting the story. What should I do? Sit in my room and cry about it all my life? I mean, yeah, you make an opportunity for yourself.
yeah.
Something horrible has happened to you, and people here want you to just rot um,
It's
alone.
I feel
And
like
that's brave,
it's
and
more
that's amazing.
the more the jealousy and the FOMO part rather than
No,
confirming to the
I'll
views.
tell you something. An educated guy. I had this, I
I
have
rem
this huge problem. So
नहीं
I had
नहीं
this
you can
fight with an educated guy, okay, and he goes to me. He goes, "Why can't you go to university in Gilgit in Swat?
yeah, you told this
खुल
on
गया है
the
ना? उसको
movie
कहो
called
उधर जाए."
uh,
And no, this is a separate friend.
okay, yeah.
And I just looked at him and I was like, "Why don't you? Why don't you go to university in Gilgit? Why did you go to university in London?" Chup. I was like, what kind of a stupid thing is that to even say? Yaar? Who in this planet goes to university in their country if they have the opportunity to go to Oxford? For God's sakes, yeah. Can you even, is there common sense in the foundation of your hate?
Yeah, it's just
You hate her for going to Oxford. You actually hate her, and the conversation you're talking about, मैं और हमजा अब्बासी बड़ी arguments करते थे पहले before he's, by the way, I have a lot of respect for him. because human beings evolve as well. No? They're not the
Yeah.
same mindset and same people.
Yeah.
And by the way, this has nothing to do with whether he likes Malala now or he doesn't like Malala. But back then, he was coming with a very pro, like it was like coming from a place of patriotism, right? And I always tell people that like I don't like to consider myself a patriot, but like I contribute to my country as much as I can, and I love my country in very different ways. I don't like this patriot tag on me. But I told him, I was like, your own sister has studied plastic surgery and she's a doctor from abroad. Why should Malala go to Gilead? Why should she go to SWAT? वो
Yeah.
चुप हो गया. तो he couldn't, but चुप होने की बात नहीं है या किसी के ऊपर आर्गुमेंट जीतने की बात नहीं है. बात यह है यार, उसको तालिबान ने गोली मारी है और सेलिब्रेट किया उसको. हम इस मेंटालिटी से अपने आप को अलहदा करें. और कोई पाकिस्तानी जिसके साथ कोई ऐसा जुल्म हो गया है या कोई ऐसी ट्रेजेडी हो गई है, हम उनको सपोर्ट करेंगे. और हम बड़े खुश हैं कि यार उसको अमेरिका ने इज्जत दी है और उसको ब्रिटानिया ने इज्जत दी है और उसको उधर लेके गए हैं. एंड शी इज वर्किंग देयर एंड शी इज मेड अ नेम एंड अ करियर यार. Yesterday I saw her at the Wimbledon and Ralph Lauren. I felt like,
Yeah.
that's so cool,
You
yeah.
as a
And I was like,
Pakistani.
there are only two people that represent us. There's Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy and there's
Yeah.
Malala. And if there are more, and I love them, like I love Wasim Akram, I love anyone who represents us internationally in the school, and but kitne hai wo Hassan Rahim, he was in Miss Marvel, Fawad Khan, Mahira, like yeah, jo bhi hai, like we should
At
love these
least.
guys.
Yeah.
Even Hamza, by the way, even Hamza, no, he won me over with his role in Mola Jat. Like now I'm
Yeah.
his fan.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but anyways, like I wish we would do that more, be more empathetic,
I
be
feel
more like.
like it's I've tried to look into so like as part of also my research, I go through the comments, which is I won't recommend anyone to do that, but I try to
I don't do.
categorize like
Sometimes I do गालियां लिखी होती है मैं वापस देख.
हाँ, but I try to get the mindset
और
of these people. Like I've met Malala hating crowd, like relatively educated, grammar school से पढ़े हुए, lumps के पढ़े हुए,
yeah, yeah.
but the thing is कि as inherently हमारे अंदर मसला ये कि we don't like we see a little girl speaking at the UN who was from Swat and our opinions like यार ये वहाँ कैसे पहुंच गई है and
CIA
यही
agent है.
and अगर
ये
यही
CIA agent. कभी CIA को मलाला की किस चीज के लिए
मतलब
जरूरत है?
exactly right and uh, I also feel like it's also again our relationship with our peripheries and our northern areas. Yahi, if a little girl would have been shot, let's say DHA Karachi, Allah na kare, but agar hota, she would have react like usko alag किस्म का response मिलता. But सवात के किसी गांव से एक बंदी वहां पहुंच गई, like they're just like, but it's just
Dude,
I
mere, I wish, this is such an incredible story. From SWAT to, UN Nobel Peace Prize. And by the way, she's living her best life.
yeah
Let me tell you. Okay,
she is yeah
no amount of
yeah
hate from Twitter and
yeah
CIA agent. Sorry, she's not ISI. She's a CIA agent, and it's an act. And just imagine. As someone who's been shot, I share this with Malala. I was shot in the leg. I'm actually very lucky. Um, it's just not something that you do for popularity. Uh, Going back to the how you introduced me, yeah, wo cool and whatever. That was very nice of you. But yeah, I, I've had the privilege of living a very good life and interacting in many social circles and society ke circles and meeting many people from various walks of life. Getting shot to do any of this is definitely not
is
ready.
no one and I wish
No
no
one
one
does.
goes
And
through it
by the
again
way,
as well.
let me tell you something. If you ever meet someone who's been shot, um, and just see them and see how they've managed to put their life together after this. Being shot is a scar that is just you. Every time you go out, every time you turn a corner, every time you're alone, this fear that you live in because somebody violated this freedom of yours of peace, came in
I
while
can
you were just
understand
going to
that.
school in a bus and shot you. This is nothing you recover from. You like I drive to work alone, and I'm nonchalant about my life, right? I refuse to live in fear, but that doesn't mean that I don't have fear. You know, uh, every time I drive alone, If somebody is following me for too long, for example, there's a motorcyclist takes two turns with me, there's an alert in my brain that's not in a normal person's brain, and it's
it's
unfair.
it's
But I live with this. This is nobody can take
and
this feeling. No therapist can take this feeling from me. I was the one who was kidnapped. You know what I
I
mean? And I
can I
lost
can
5 years of my life.
I can
You
imagine.
think I drive in peace? Every time I drive in peace, I don't. Sometimes I रात को जब मुझे गाड़ी चलानी होती है और मैं कहीं रायबन से मैंने इधर आना होता है और इतनी बैरिया टाउन से कैवलरी ग्राउंड बहुत लंबी रोड है, कनाल पे भी आप अकेले जा रहे हैं, गोइंग थ्रू ऑल ऑफ दैट alone. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not shaking. I'm driving. I'm fine.
You
But
have that
there is a link
inherent
there. That
दिमाग में
it
एक
never
fear.
leaves.
It and it
That can I be followed? I know exactly how I was traced, how I was tried. It was very intricate. The way that they kidnapped me, they spent over 1 crore rupees in 2011. Yeah, the dollar was at 85. Just imagine how much money he spent at that time. Over $100,000 kidnapping me. And this is in 2011. He bought a house in Valencia. He bought two cars. They bought mobile phones. They bought guns. They had a full group. It was properly planned. So it's a little insensitive. मुझे भी बड़े लोग कहते हैं कि अभी तुम झूठ है, तुम्हारे साथ ये हुआ ही नहीं. कोई किसी ने मुझे कहा कि हमने
fame
सुना
के
था
लिए
कि आप दुबई थे. मैंने कहा किधर? तो किसी ने कहा कि आपकी फैमिली के कर्जे थे, तो हमने सुना है आप इस वजह से घूमे हुए थे. So I just looked at this particular person who said this, and I was like, I have a public limited company, and I work with commercial banks. I don't work with loan sharks and drug dealers. मैं इज्जतदार इंसान हूँ यार. मैंने कोई ऐसा कर्जा ही नहीं लिया जिसकी वजह से मुझे तालिबान अगवा करेंगे. यार तुम लोग पागल तो नहीं हो गए? मेरी माँ बेवा है यार, मेरा छोटा भाई और छोटी बहन है. लाइक ये ड्राम, लाइक I get it, drama. मतलब if I started a Instagram live channel called keeping up with the Taseers, that's drama. But
thing up with the
disappear
dust.
for 4.5 years, is not the kind of way. It's again not the way to get your commercial debt cancelled. I still have to pay my money to the banks. I still have to work with the SCCP. I still live under the regular guidelines that I have to live under,
It's
and I'm
I
still
think
governed by the
how
Constitution of Pakistan.
आई थिंक इट्स द जो हमें फेम जो हम हेट करते हैं ना फेम जब दूसरे लाइक आवर फेलो कंट्रीमैन व्हेन इवन एट होम और अब्रॉड वो हर किस्म की कंस्पिरेसी थ्योरी मानने के लिए तैयार हो जाते हैं उनको यकीन ही नहीं आता कि इस
Yeah.
अपने मुल्क को क्योंकि वो पिट समझते हैं कि इससे निकल के कोई इतना मतलब सक्सेसफुल कैसे हो सकता है मेरी जिंदगी तो मतलब लाइक आई शुडंट कर्स एट वेल बट
नहीं,
उनकी अपनी
like
जिंदगी
I'll tell you यार. मैंने अपनी जिंदगी में ना अपने बिजनेसेस में मुझे ये अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह मेरे माँ बाप ने इतना काम किया अपनी जिंदगी में कि मेरे और मेरे भाई के लिए बहुत मुश्किल है. इट्स नॉट इजी इस मुल्क में काम करना और ऑपरेट करना और यू नो to be a legitimate honest businessman in this country is like you might as well give up. But we do it, and we enjoy it, and we like working, and we like difficult times, and we like good times, and whatever it is, we do it. Okay, we contribute. But you can never put a price on empathy or learn being more empathetic to people that have gone through you know thing. And I
it's
don't like it's not like an appeal for pity or something. It's not even for myself because I don't really need it. But I see people, and like the Malala thing, it hurt me. I love her. I learn from her. I see her making the most of her opportunity. And by the way, what I was trying to tell you that besides this, ये जो मेरा business है, इसके अंदर मेरे पास एक पूरी टीम है और वो you know it's I it's a management, and it works in a amazing fashion. Okay, we brainstorm and we run things and we designate responsibilities and we make things happen and we build things and we sell things and we lose things, and it's a game. Business is a game. But what I've had to do for my book, right? I have no privilege for that. I have
yeah.
never done it. I've stepped into the wild, ocean, in a little raft, and I've had to work like I've never had to work in my life for anything, by the way. And I have to do interviews, and I have to do podcasts, and I have to go over the same thing. And it requires a certain element of dedication, by the way. And I've studied Malala. I have studied what she has done, and I try to implement her in my life because she's a unbelievable human being. I studied Shirmeen Abair, and I saw how she put her, herself as a brand and made a platform. And look at what she does with her films. She's empowered so many people in so many different regions. She's got that citizens archive, and like the kind of contributions that these two women are making to this country. And I've actually like, I'm not saying that I'm trying to market myself or work like, like in some twisted manner, but like literally I've sat and seen them, and I've seen how they've had to work hard, and they've had to listen to galia, and they've had to listen to, complete BS from people that don't have the right to speak to them directly, यार frankly. सही है, मैं उनका बॉडीगार्ड या पब्लिसिस्ट होगा, मैं हर एक बंदे के घर जाके चपेड़ मार के उसको सीधा करता हूँ, तो तू क्या ट्विटर पे इतनी बड़ी बातें
It's
करता है यार
just,
अपनी.
yeah, it's
But
just the
I've
social
actually
media
studied them
wave.
as,
Yeah.
no, but and I'm trying to do it, and I promise you, yeah, it's not easy. It
It's
requires
I
work,
understand. I totally
and
understand.
and it's amazing. But that's what you have to do in life, and I
Yeah.
wish people would do that rather than
Instead
criticize
of
and put.
like putting down people. Aapki story, I feel like a lot of us, the other day I was telling someone that I might have a spot at doing a recording with you, and they're like, यार वो depressing story है, वो किताब तुम क्यों किसी को recommend
We can
करोगे?
make it fun.
And I was like, dude, वो बंदा जो सारे सिस्टम से गुजर कर आ गया है, वो हमारे साथ, हमारे कराची में किसी का फोन छिन जाता है ना, वो 6 महीने के लिए दुबई चला जाता है, साल के लिए मैं इधर उधर हो जाता है. एंड दैट गाय वेंट थ्रू लाइक अभी, लाइक नॉट टू रिफ्लेक्ट ऑन अभी जो पाकिस्तान में क्या हो रहा है, बट पीपल, मतलब पाकिस्तान में अभी ये जा रही है जो पॉलिटिक्स चल रही है, लोग, आई नो पीपल जो जिन्होंने कुछ बोल दिया होगा सोशल मीडिया पे, वो कोई दुबई शुबई जाके बैठ गए हैं. एंड this guy went through something which is insane, this which is like a, मतलब not to exaggerate, but like अगर मैं यहाँ पे किसी डच बंदे को बताऊं कि I'm interviewing you and you went through this, they'll be like, how is he still alive, how is he, why is he living in that country अभी, which is also a
You should tell them to buy my
yeah,
book, by the way.
yeah,
You can go to
बल्कि I went to,
shabaztaseer.com.
yeah, I the other day, I'm in a very small student town, so I went to the only English bookstore we have here, and I showed them the book, and they're like, "ये अभी तक यहाँ पे आई नहीं है, probably Amsterdam आ गई होगी, यहाँ नहीं आई है." But I was telling my friends the story, and they couldn't comprehend it. But as a Pakistani, I can comprehend it because I've grown up in. Even if I tell a second generation Pakistani growing up in New York or like Houston, उसको भी नहीं समझ आएगी, वो कहेगा भाई
Yeah,
ये.
by the way,
Yeah,
the most crazy reactions that I've had are from Pakistanis in America and England.
yeah,
And they get like completely taken back, like, why are you still living in this country? And I
yeah,
have to tell them, yeah, this is my home. I'm not going to run away from home. I ran from the middle of Afghanistan back here. So, and the thing is that, like, I know, like, my home is the wild, wild west, and it's a difficult place to live, but it's my place. Yeah, it's my home, and no one is going to take it from me.
it's,
And
yeah, it's
with the
fascinating.
story, it is a very dark story, and
It's
your friend is not
extreme.
wrong.
Yeah,
It's a depressing story. It's a dark story.
yeah.
I'm very grateful to people that actually take the time out to read the book. Talking to me is more fun than reading the book, by
No,
the way.
and it's amazing क्योंकि पता है अभी मैं lately in the last 2 years, like whenever I go to Pakistan, पहले इतना नहीं होता था, I don't know, you would know better, but अब एक बहुत ज्यादा मेरी generation में हो गया कि we have to leave this country. They've made it this into a competition, which was,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like when I went to LUMS, I knew a lot of people who opted for LUMS instead of going abroad, like when I was like 18 years old, 2016.
yeah.
So I was, मैं अभी अप्रैल में कराची में था, and my sister had already given me your book, और मैं साथ साथ पढ़ भी रहा. I met this friend like चाय पे, and they're like, यार अब तो निकलना है, अब तो निकलना है, and I referred your book. I'm like, dude, here's someone who went through all of this, और वो अभी भी पाकिस्तान में रह रहे हैं, ठीक है उनका privilege है, but I know people who fake their sect or ethnicity or even nationality for an asylum in Europe, or I don't know, whatever. But you are still, you drive every day to work. You live in Lahore, in like the
Yeah, but
limelight.
I'll be honest with you. It's a very difficult country to live in. I never like to give my own. You can't take one person's life and apply it to
Yeah,
another.
yeah,
मेरे
yeah,
पास कुछ सहूलियात अभी भी हैं,
yeah,
जिसकी वजह से मैं relatively मतलब you know um, रह सकता हूँ.
yeah,
मगर मसला ये होता है कि जब इकोनॉमिक अपॉर्चुनिटी, अब मेरा एक यंग दोस्त है, वो सऊदी चला गया, सही है, और
yeah,
वो कहता है यार आई रादर रिस्क इट, मैंने उनका 10-20 साल का प्लान पढ़ा है, and if I can get in there right now and just put my head down and work 3-4 saal and start rising through managerial positions, then in the next 20 years I see a career and a future for myself in Saudi Arabia, and either it's not going to happen for me over there.
Yeah.
Right? And a lot of my friends that are career oriented people, they're very worried. Look, growing up, um, my whole life, right? Let's forget my whole life. Let's take my work life. My work life, I have seen the dollar go from 70 to 100 from
Early 2000s.
2009 to 2018 or 17, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So 10, I don't know how many years, 10 odd years. There's been like a 14 से 16 रुपए की
It's
variation.
insane. I
Yeah.
don't
And
tell.
then now in the
Yeah.
last 2 years or 3 years, I have seen it almost triple from what I've seen in my entire.
Oh,
So
yeah.
if the dollar was at 86, right, that means that my father, from the creation of Pakistan till the day that he died, he saw the dollar and rupee variation to 86 rupees in 67 years of his adult professional life. And in 13 or 12 years of my adult professional life, I've seen it go from 86 to almost 300 रुपए. 300 क्या 300 भी क्रॉस किया है मैंने 312 पे डॉलर.
Up to 300 भी it's just something I don't जब मेरा grad school शुरू हुआ था 2021 I came here, the euro was like 183 or something. Now it's like 310. And sometimes I'm
Yeah.
just having conversations with like my friends from like Egypt and India and all these places, and I tell them the exchange rate, like हम खाने पे कहीं गए हैं because everyone's doing Dutch, and they're like, dude, हमने हमें ना कभी तुमसे पैसे मांगते हो ना शर्म आ जाती है यार, like when you see the
मैं तो
exchange rate.
कहता हूँ लोगों को, मैं बाहर होता हूँ, मेरा कोई दोस्त कहता है बिल पे करो, तुम्हारी बारी है, मैं कहता हूँ अल्लाह का नाम ले यार, मैं मेरे लिए मैं these dollars are everything to me, तुम लोग पे करो. अभी I was
It's
in New York with
yeah.
Wajahat and a very good friend of mine, Haris, and another friend, and they all took me for dinner. And Wajahat and I were doing the talk. So, anyways, they were all talking about, पता नहीं मैं पाकिस्तान नहीं जा सकता, मैंने कहा ये तो बिल तो पे करो ना यार, सबसे पहले मैं बिल नहीं पे कर सकता, तुम लोग ये डॉलर्स पे करो, उसके बाद अपनी जिंदगी के मसले मुझे बताओ. बट यार,
It's
बट लाइक आई एम जोकिंग, बट जो भी है, इट्स, मैं आपको बता रहा हूँ कि ये एक चीज है आपके जो मुल्क में सबसे अमीर लोग हैं, जो बंदा है इस मुल्क में वो तबाह हो गया है. लोग एलीट की बात करते हैं, तो यार अगर आप एक मुल्क में काम करते हो और आपने अपनी पूरी जिंदगी का इन्वेस्टमेंट की हुई है, चलो आपको ले कहते हैं प्रिविलेज हो, एलीट हो, but work is work, right? And imagine I just saw my company, I wake up every morning and I see my company devalued 75%. My wealth is devalued by 75% in the international market, right? So that's I mean, what kind of an elite are you really? You're really just like an
it's
anomaly in
just
your own country.
yeah.
Everywhere else you're poor, you have no value. And हम
You're
लोग अपने फिर बिजनेसमैन को अटैक भी करते हैं. लाइक अभी
हाँ.
मेरा एक दोस्त था, वो कहता है he attacked Mia Mansha. Had everything handed to him. I wasn't had everything handed to him. So he said,
No.
"Oh, the
I'm
NCP."
with Chinuti. I can tell that Mansha's story is also like he has a lot of
Let me tell
money.
you. So he goes that Mansha was handed NCP
वो
on a
जिसमें
platter.
हाँ with Nawaz Sharif
So
and
I said, I was like, do you think that he was handed it on a platter? What is a platter? You
yeah.
have to have 3 or 4 hundred million dollars to be able to eat from this platter. Where did you get the 300 400? If you have 300 400 million dollars, you can also eat from the platter.
Yeah.
First, you have to have 3 400 million dollars.
$1 million बिल्कुल
You
ऐसे.
can't be handed that kind of money. And to
Yeah.
make that kind of money in Pakistan, you only have to make it to understand how that's possible. I know many khandans in this country, many families जिनके 3-4 generation inherited business है, जिनकी कोई बस day to day और महीने का खर्चा और 2 holidays abroad और एक घड़ी at the end of the year है. Progression, building cooperations, building companies that will outlive you, outlive your children, creating a legacy, employing thousands and thousands and
Thousands of
thousands,
people.
thousands. Yeah, you can't be handed the stuff on a platter.
No, it's
So, but that comes back to that. But anyways, right now things are very difficult here.
they are
And
they
young
are
people, the the problem is that you need to create something in this country which brings your young people. अब मेरा एक मेरा एक मतलब nephew है और वो भी तुम he's your age, he's just graduating from college and अब वो work, he's going to
looking for
start
work.
working and yeah, and he came to Pakistan for 1 year and that's it. He said the worst experience. He's like, my life is static, it's dull, it's boring, I can't grow. I'm young. I want to go to museums. I want to walk in the street. I want to do certain things that I think are just part of my childhood. And I don't even mind doing them alone and not having big social circles and driving fancy cars yet. But if I don't educate my soul, what an empty,
It's
dull life. Money and,
yeah.
money is
No, I
this
totally
illusion.
understand. Yeah, it's
There are people in Gujarat that are richer than me. Okay, and they live in golden houses that look like God knows what, and they never leave Gujarat, and that's just the life. Then they have stacks more cash than you can imagine. But
yeah.
the children have never been to it. They're, by the way, very, very rich people in Lahore who you think are like the most it people, and all they do is buy a designer bag. And their wives have all the latest designer bags, and they are dressed head to toe in designer. And you ask them to name you three things Michelangelo has done, or
They
what was
won't
Da
know.
Vinci,
They
or
won't know.
a museum in Rome, and you know that's the end of it. And the only reason, by the way, they would have gone to the museum is to take a selfie for Instagram.
Or an Instagram story, yeah. And the exposure, like I feel like जब आप बाहर आते हो, I know a lot of my friends, the money factor is there aside as well, but it's also the freedom, the absolute, like considering if you're invest in Europe, like even from my experience, even relative to the US, the absolute freedom you feel while you're walking on the street in the Netherlands or let's say Germany or Berlin, and like you go to an artist commune, you go to like a guy playing guitar on the street, and ये कोई इतने अमीर लोग नहीं
Cafes,
है.
restaurants, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
and
it's an experience.
and
It's a
like the way they appreciate art forms, the way they appreciate music. Like I tell this to a lot of people, but 2 months ago I met this Dutch guy who is a huge Nuri fan. His One of his
oh yeah.
parents was from Suriname, so they understand Hindi, Urdu, thoda sa, and Suriname was like a Dutch colony. So he told me, dude, when I was writing my master's thesis, मैं मनवारे सुनता था, मैं मेरे लोग सुनता था, और मैं नूरी की initial album सुनता था. And I was just,
Man, मैंने Nuri, by the way, his first album when I was in college, it was
I'm
like
a
a big
huge
thing.
Nuri fan as well. Yeah,
So
I've
my
met
friends
Ali
used
Noor
to
as
love
well.
it as well.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. My friends used to love it. And Dev Das भी मैंने उनको दिखाई थी उस वक्त
yeah,
वो उस पे बड़ा हंसे थे. And I guess you never really understand Indian films till you see it with a white person, and then you
yeah.
really understand
You really
Indian film.
understand them. Like I feel
Yeah.
like
And my friends were like, "What is going on? Why did they just start dancing?" and, and I was like, "You're right. I've
it's
never really
just
seen it. You always expect them to dance, but yeah."
for
नहीं
yeah. Just to add on to that, for one of our classes here, one of our Indian professors showed Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum ka scene जिसमें शाहरुख खान helicopter से भागता हुआ आ रहा है, and like Jaya Bachchan is waiting for him. So my white friends went like, dude, this happens in India and Pakistan. Like you guys get off like helicopters, and like I'm like, dude, ये नहीं होता. होता
by
होगा,
the way
like
होता है
होता है.
मेरे
आजाद कश्मीर में शायद
I
होता
had
होगा. Yeah.
yeah, I actually had a friend propose to had she was proposed to like this. So her fiance took her for a helicopter ride, and then
In
basically they
Pakistan or
landed.
abroad, I think.
Yeah, yeah, in Pakistan, man, and basically took her for a helicopter ride, and they landed. And आगे there was like a stage built in the जहाँ भी वो field में was land हुआ. It wasn't a long helicopter ride. It was like a 5 minute helicopter ride, one place to the other.
This is
एंड वो सारे दोस्त जो थे वो शादी के कपड़ों में और वो गा रहे थे मुझसे शादी करोगी and he ran on the stage and joined the dance and like proposed and it was you know well done. I
it's
mean the
it's
guy
it's
is a legend by the
amazing.
way.
And
Yeah, yeah.
even
Oh,
नहीं नहीं आप बोलें, you can finish.
yeah. So the guy is a legend now. Now every girl that you propose to in Lahore, Islamabad, or Karachi
Benchmark
expects
set हो गया है.
like yeah, the benchmark is like you can't just like pop it, and
Yeah,
say, "Will you
just
marry
like
me?" They're
that.
like, "Where's the crew?
Yeah.
Where's the dark?"
But again, I think हम जो trauma की बात कर रहे थे, and lately what I've seen coming out of Pakistan, like the art coming out of Pakistan, the music coming out of Pakistan, Coke Studio, Pasuri, Spotify, Hassan Rahim ke shows in the UK, and I feel like uh, like there's this very famous Instagram handle I follow. This guy creates very good reels called Mr. Paki. Like shout out if he's watching us. But like जितना chaos में हम पाकिस्तान इस वक्त है, and जो हमारा आर्ट निकल रहा है उस part of the world से, which is ठीक है, economic हालात बुरे हैं, and it might be very nice to say all of the things while I'm in the Netherlands, like listening to Coke Studio songs. But this also fascinates me because I don't know any other country. I might, but जो इतने trauma से गुजर के भी they live to see another day. They produce kick-ass music. They produce
So,
great
you know
sportsmen.
something, the greatest renaissance periods in countries
Yeah.
and the best time for art, it usually comes from
Yeah,
uh,
like well, it was
this.
the best of times and the worst of times. Like wo jo,
Yeah.
like what they consider.
By
But
the way, all the art, like my little stormtrooper in the back,
yeah,
the painting up there, this one, these are all like all the. I'm a big art collector, by the way, so I
yeah,
love young Pakistani artists. I go to NCA exhibitions. I go as much as I can, and all the art that I buy is young Pakistanis. And
नहीं
तो जो
great
जैसे
and
अमीर हो जाते हैं तो फिर वो ज्यादा महंगे हो जाते हैं तो पहली
वो
एडिशन ही पकड़ लो.
yeah
The talent in this country is phenomenal.
is
Like, so being an art,
phenomenal.
yeah,
Even
just being into
even
art,
like,
this is a treasure. Like the kind of stuff that is created in this country is actually treasure.
and I feel
If
like
you've ever heard of Salman Tu,
I
his
know
paintings
Salman
are worth
Tour. Yeah,
millions of
yeah,
dollars.
I
Okay,
know Salman Tour.
Ashik
And
Rana,
Sharmeen Obaid Chinoy, and even like the kind of music. So you kind of realize your own art forms जब आप पाकिस्तान से बाहर आते हो. मैंने अपने कुछ इंडियन दोस्तों को फारिस सुनाया and हसन रहीम सुनाया and even like other like non-Hindi speaking friends like from South India, and they were young stunners सुनाया मैंने उनको like with the video and everything and our like cricket songs and all. They were like, dude, मतलब this is like crazy
yeah,
music,
yeah, we have way better music than
like
yeah.
and they were like,
The biggest thing
but
in India is Atif and Ali Zafar and
Atif and
Jalil
Ali
and
Zafar
Rahat
and
Fateh.
Rahat. And
Yeah,
the
yeah.
thing is कि despite of all of that, even अब तो खैर थोड़ा बेहतर हो गया है, but I was talking to my Pakistani friend the other day कि अभी भी we are known for things that make you stand in a queue compared to things that gets like 600 million views on Pasuri. But हमारा जो global image है, that's still on the post 9/11 fundo Pakistani कि फट जाऊंगा मैं अभी टाइप वाला माहौल compared to like the art and YouTube and Coke Studio and Spotify and TikTok that's like coming out of our country. Like it's
No,
still
but
up.
you know, like मैं लोगों को ये बताता हूँ, you know, like sometimes you also need to put people in perspective. Like Europe is a very extremist,
Yeah,
it has a
it
very
is.
extremist environment there as well. They're fighting a full-blown war, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And an entire people in an entire country has suffered because of their, you know, ideological
Their
differences.
ambitions and differences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
their ambitions. And then, like, you know, like they're disappointing countries in Europe as well. Like when England left the European Union, why do you think they left it? They didn't want people taking their jobs, right? That's what the argument was. We don't want Europeans coming in and taking our jobs. That's like borderline racist and classist. And, you know, I mean, they didn't want to be part of union work laws and God knows what. I mean, it was pathetic. And then it gets more extreme as you go down, when you go down to Hungary. You know,
East is
उन्होंने
so yeah.
yeah, no, they built an entire wall. Like हम लोग Trump की बात करते हैं कि he wanted to build a wall in
Yeah.
Mexico, but Hungary actually built a wall so that immigrants, Muslim immigrants from Syria and Iraq who were running from war could not access Europe. They didn't even want to go to Hungary. They wanted to go to Germany. But Hungary ने अपना border close किया जाके access रोके to Central Europe. The Greeks, the Italians, the
What
French, they're
recently
saying,
happened with the Greek
what you know
tragedy.
ये लोग बड़ा कह रहे थे कि ओ you know इतना बड़ा
Illegal
ट्रेजेडी हुआ
है.
है and I was like तुम लोग बेवकूफ हो, like तुम्हें पता नहीं है ये क्या इनकी तो इनकी पॉलिसी है यार. They sink these boats. The Coast Guard of Greece, of Italy, and I don't want to get into trouble or something, they sue me or something for saying this, but I'm sorry yaar, another
It's
ship sunk the other day.
yeah.
They run the
It went
trees
off
off,
the coast of
they
Spain.
chase them, they fire at them, they don't let them access the land. They put them into then like literally these immigration detention centers that are like prisons, okay, and they're living in these camps literally. And so you know they're very extremist as well. So you know I know that our country has suffered different type of extremism. but don't
It's
let
just
it
like
feel like,
we're a scapegoat now. We're not that rich. Even within India, India has done some of the most horrible things to a lot of people there. But due to that economic might and due to
yeah.
the tech influence and they get
Whenever I speak to, by the way, my Indian friends, I always advise, and I'm like, तुम लोगों को अगर हमसे इतनी नफरत है, then you should learn something from us, which is just don't confuse and mix your religion with your politics and into
yeah
your society. As
yeah
vibrant as your society is, as culturally different, as religiously different as it is in the world's largest democracy, as you like to call yourselves,
yeah.
um, you shouldn't introduce this mindset because it'll turn into a very fascist extremist. And by the way, you see that over there.
And it's happening.
So,
Like my friends tell me that it's happening, and India is probably going through a phase which like I don't like to draw comparisons, but somewhat to what we kind of felt through like during Zia's tenure as well. But it's
yeah,
yeah during
but see,
like
Zia was a dictator,
yeah,
and we
and
had a
these guys are
massive, massive opposition standing up to him in Benazir
exactly
Bhutto. We don't give
exactly
BB credit, but BB was the line against
yeah
that mindset that Zia was,
exactly.
which he has entrenched, and we are suffering from it even today. But she was the face of that resistance. But religious figures in Pakistan have never made it to the assembly. I mean, Maulana Fazlur
I
Rahman has
tell
been.
this to people. I tell this to people. Sorry,
We
आपकी बात
vote him
काट
up.
रहा हूँ. But a party like the BJP, like the equivalent of it, has never made it more than 3 or 4%. Even Jamaat Islami itself, 3% vote bank. Our mainstream parties, including the PTI, are relatively, I would say, liberal enough, like वो तो white enough कहते हैं, but we are like normal mainstream parties. You don't find BJP like figures in people's
PTI
parties.
has a couple of crazy people in KPK.
मतलब हाँ मतलब
Uh,
पीटीआई का कुछ हो गया सी but the PTI electorate if you see their average voter in Karachi Lahore they're like normal
the young
people
people.
they're
हम्म।
young they're relatively educated but
नहीं नहीं मेरे बड़े दोस्त मेरी my wife is a PTI support. मेरे
yeah
बड़े
like
दोस्त PTI
I've
support.
seen the tweets and
I like PTI for a little while. I like them while they were in
I
government. I
my
have
first
to bring
yeah
back here.
my first
I
ever
didn't
vote
understand.
yeah my first ever vote in life in 2018 was for the PTI but
Really,
I've
mine was for PMLQ.
yeah my
So
yeah that was 2018. I was a huge in fact my master's thesis right now which I'm writing is also on PTI. It's on the rise of populism in South Asia, but that includes PTI. But that's like a different story. But this is what I tell to my Indian friends that we get a lot of slack for a lot of things we haven't done. Like you don't see like fundamentalists in like for all its like woos. I don't think so that TLP can actually make it to majority of the parliament. Like that's not a possibility in Pakistan. Like आप जितनी मर्जी
no
पाकिस्तान को
chance.
गालियां दे दो that won't happen. Like
They
10
can't
सीटें
even Maulana Saab is 10, 20,000
yeah
times bigger than TLP. And Maulana Saab can't barely wins a seat himself here.
and
So
yeah
we've rejected this in our parliament and in our electorate. The sometimes I don't know if I can get into trouble for saying this, but like our military has you know
used yeah they've used these forces
uses
yeah
political parties to split votes, but
yeah
that doesn't mean that they can win a seat. So
yeah
even inside the military, yeah, extremism in this way, this
it's
mentality. By the way,
yeah
the military has suffered because of it more than anyone else. सिपाही
yeah
ज़्यादा सारे उनके मरते हैं. ये वजीरिस्तान और इस तरह की जगहों में when they hit these checkposts and they hit these camps and it's all the military that takes these losses. So sometimes people say that they don't learn or they don't know. I know that the military has carried a massive offensive against this and they've rejected this inside their institution.
I think
So
inherently as a country like मुझे end पर उस पर आना था but if you say if you see Malala even if you say Benazir from our earlier times if you see the neighborhood we live in, like we have like Iran on our one side, we have Afghanistan now, or of the Afghanistan of before, it doesn't like make a lot of difference. We have India under the BJP on our right. We have the communist like Uppar. But this is what I tell a lot of people here, a lot of my white friends and my professors here. That Pakistan still has maintained that sense of normalcy and a relatively stable system, regardless के हमारे बहुत मसले हैं. but you don't see those
China,
characters.
Iran, and India would be very offended with this, by the way.
नहीं नहीं
They
मतलब
would tell you that, wow, yaar.
yeah, मतलब I wrote this. So Iran was going through this Masa Amini wale protest. I'm not sure if you followed, like the girl who was taken by the morality
Killed.
police, and I wrote a paper and got published in one of like Oxford के.
Wasn't she killed? उसके सर पे उन्होंने
उसको उन्होंने
like
baton charge किया था, but she collapsed at the. They have they like to call them re-education centers, but it's like where they
oh,
take young women that you should wear
yeah,
the scarf and stuff like that. उसको वहां पे
yeah.
उन्होंने मारा था, but she collapsed and they said कि heart attack or something like that. I wrote a paper on that for one of my courses and later got published. And I got a lot of slack from my comments मैंने पढ़े कि वो Indians और Iranians से कि देखो पाकिस्तानी इस बारे में क्या बोल सकते हैं. And I'm like, dude, we're still way better. We don't have anyone morally okay. We have our cultural reasons, but हमारी सड़कों पे गुलबर्ग में कोई नहीं बोल रहा होता आपको कि आप इस तरह के कपड़े पहने. At least the state doesn't do it. There's no state enforcement of morality or dress code in our part of the world. And they're like nahi and like yeah, and but then again I think we have done हाँ मतलब
Areas
culture
है ना, लाहौर, कराची और
yeah,
गुलबर्ग, literally.
but like at least
Peshawar
state
में अगर
level
आप
में
करें तो you could be killed.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, it's not easy. इधर हमारे
yeah,
बड़े बड़े गांव के अंदर like मुख्तारा माई के साथ देखो क्या हुआ था
yeah,
यार.
yeah, that
चिड़े
was
ने
yeah.
चिड़गा जो भी कहते हैं.
हाँ
Actually
problems
reported.
yeah,
By the way, we're all very similar. हमारे में इतना फर्क नहीं है. उधर अगर एक औरत को उन्होंने बैटन चार्ज किया, मॉरल पुलिस के ऊपर तेजाब फेंक के दफना देते हैं अपने. सही है ना.
yeah.
इधर भी उधर भी वो पागल हैं, वो पता नहीं बच्चों के ऊपर क्या कर रहे होते हैं. और all of them. But the truth is China has given a stable platform to its citizens to
Yeah,
progress and invested a lot of money into them. India, for whatever you want to say, has done the same,
their
and Iran with all
economic progress,
sanctions.
even Iran's economic and infrastructural progress, regardless of the sanctions, is ठीक है उनके views are different, but basic necessities of life में वो आपको तंग नहीं करते. Like you can make money, you can get on the
Answers.
metro, you can
Or by
like
the way, if you go to our Balochistan, Waziristan belt that is along the borders with Iran, products भी सारे उधर के ही हैं.
सारे yeah, they're all or like Iranian products.
तो जब
Yeah,
मैं नेपाल में था, we used to only get Iranian products. We were only eating Iranian goods,
yeah.
nothing else. It was all
थोड़ा सा
Iranian.
yeah, like back to your captivity अगर like we have almost crossed like the 1 hour 20 minute mark, but अगर आपके पास थोड़ा सा time है, I wanted to know the last few months of like मतलब वो the story from Shawal to the Salim Hotel, which was in Afghanistan or Pakistan. Like you mentioned Salim Hotel a lot.
Yeah, it's a really long journey. It's
Yeah,
maybe a year, right? So at the height of the military operation, जब ये इन्होंने APS पे अटैक करके उन बच्चों को मारा था, that was around December, if I'm not wrong.
16
And
December 2014.
yeah, and उस वक्त the Pakistan military basically decided that बस मतलब उन्होंने मीरली और मिरानशाह दाता खेल को डिमोलिश कर दिया था बम करके. और उन्होंने कहा यार इस सारे एरिया को क्लीन करो, मतलब कुछ छोड़ो ही ना, जो रह गया है वो उसको कत्ल करो. एंड दिस वाज अ वार्निंग उन्होंने बड़ी दायद भेजी थी. और वो रूथलेसली थ्रू द मंथ ऑफ दिसंबर एंड नवंबर वो रूथलेस एरियल बम्बार्डमेंट करते थे. इट वाज एवरी सिंगल नाइट वी स्लेप्ट इन द जंगल. एंड टू अ पॉइंट दैट आई इवन रिमेंबर हम वी यूज्ड टू वो बड़े पाइन ट्री के नीचे ना मैं डिग करता था होल, और उसके अंदर हम घुस के सोते थे अपने वो स्लीपिंग बैग्स के अंदर जिप करके उनको बंद. एंड इट वाज लाइक अ कबर, यू नो. इट्स लाइक रात को सोए हुए अगर लग गया कुछ तो यू ऑन, आवाज करीब आई एंड यू स्टार्ट रनिंग तो यू लकी. बट यू नो इट्स लाइक अ कबर. एनीवेज इट वाज अ वेरी डिफिकल्ट. I think
That's just
6 months I spent in Shawal. 6, 7 months I spent in Shawal, and we
uh,
were bombed out into Afghanistan.
I
Then
was
I spent,
wondering yeah,
yeah,
I was wondering कि जो मीरली वाला टाइम था और शवाल वाला टाइम था, इसमें ऑब्वियसली मिलिट्री चेक पोस्ट भी होती थी, पेट्रोल्स भी होते थे, तो आपका
नहीं
कभी
नहीं
ऐसा नहीं हो कि यू कुड रीच आउट टू
नहीं, there are no
समवन.
military checkposts and things. The militants have their own route, and the official route is a completely different one. So when you left Mirali for Data Khel, there's a you know another completely different way, and no military man goes on that way. That's a you know दोनों की अपनी routes हैं.
अपनी अपनी उनकी
And
लाइक
yeah, and I got to Shawal in one day. I think I stopped in Data Kela Khan, but literally एक मतलब सुबह हम निकले होंगे तो रात को मैं शवाल पहुंच गया था. And it's not like your regular drive, you know. There's no lights, there's no
Yeah.
road there.
Yeah.
मैं आपको जब कहता हूँ ना road है, that's it's a path. There's no road,
Yeah.
no metal road. And it's a crazy drive. Obviously मैं भी दो मतलब militants के साथ था, तो मुझे वो safety तो थी कि could not get robbed or looted or murdered in the middle of the night. But it's, you really realize like what the wild west is. Anyways, we got to Shawal. We spent 6 months there. We were bombarded every single night. Drone strikes, jet strikes, helicopter strikes, shrapnel, ये इनके जो rockets here, but it's kind of
Mortars,
every war
shells.
machinery, mortars. There was a joint operation between the US, NATO, and Pakistan. They carried out this military airstrike, and there were like 3 jets and helicopters and a drone flying and a C-1 bomber or something. And but they literally took out, you know, an area that your eye could see.
Yeah.
And I was running from these things. You know, I was in these strikes, running for my life, making it from destination bombed to safety. There's a crazy story that's not in my book, by the way, and we have a recording of it, my mother and me, is when I called her, I was in outside
A
of
mess.
Shawal. We were
Oh.
going from Shawal to Afghanistan, and it was one of the last times I called my mother, and she didn't hear from me for many months after that. And when I called her, I was speaking to her, and suddenly I'm like, oh, a drone came. And I just ran. And you know what I was about to do? We were on the side of a mountain, and I was just going to jump off the cliff. And my guard grabbed me last second. I just wasn't, I saw the drone, and I was just going to jump off the cliff. And he grabbed me and we ran. And there were about 25 of us. And we split and ran in different directions. I was with my guard Suhail. एंड हम पता नहीं कहाँ गए और कैसे भागे और एक मोटरसाइकिल पे बैठे और हम वहां से निकले. एंड आई स्वेयर टू यू, मैं, इट्स लाइक द स्काई वाज ऑन लाइक रेनिंग फायर.
Matlab, it's like
And
apocalyptic.
it's like an apocalyptic scene. And you know what's crazy about it is it was just a normal day. And was so excited that I got to finally talk to my mother. It had been months. And the conversations were very sad, but you know, I just liked hearing her voice. And I'll never forget that figure. I almost jumped off a cliff. I just almost jumped. That's what your life is like. When we got to Afghanistan, these militants all fell into sajda. And I'll never forget, there was an Afghan guy who
Yeah.
just said that, you know, idhar kutta bhi khulle aasman ke niche nahi sota. Even a dog doesn't sleep under the open sky. What are you guys praying for? And that's when the Rome story, the rebuttal for the Rome
Yeah.
episode,
Yeah.
I gave that to him as well. But Afghanistan is like exactly like that. You can't even sleep under the open sky. It's just it's a god-forsaken, lawless,
Yeah.
just the scariest place. You know, एक जगह है गोमल, Afghanistan में. It's a little smuggler, but it's not smuggler now. It's a militant outpost. But back in the day, जब ये smuggling routes होती थी, these were the old smuggling routes of the world. So all the in and outs of Asia and Europe, these were the routes and the passages used to go to these countries. And so we were driving at night, यार, and you know, आपकी जो beam है, उससे आगे you can't see, and they're old
Yeah.
Corollas. Beams भी बड़ी light होती हैं. You got like 5 feet or 6 feet visibility. And you know, even the trees look like you're in like some like a like a horror movie, like The Nun, or you know, like one of these crazy movies where they're running in these god-forsaken forests and jungles, and they're so. And the only thing that I had at the time was 2 militants with guns. Ke chalo, you know, this is my safety.
Protection. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's gonna, no human being is going to attack them. God help if something else comes from somewhere. You know, kabhi kabar when you're walking in jungles, and I'll never forget, My guard told me once, he's like, "You're very easy." So I was like, because we were now walking into Afghanistan. So I told him, I was like, I miss today is probably a United game. So he just looked at me and he's like, 3 days we've been running from bombing and you're worried about a United game. And I was like, I'm just trying to distract my brain because I'm not functioning. I'm not eating anything. And I'm just trying to think about, like, I hope we win because it's been a shitty season. And hasa wo thoda, and he's like, if you want to distract your mind, why don't you think that a bear or a lion or like some crazy anaconda will come and eat you? Like, look where we're walking. And that's the first time I was like, shit. I'm in the middle of a jungle and I'm thinking about Man United in the middle of the night. Yeah, I should actually have my brain is not functioning. But I had the security that this group is with me till they mentioned lions, and you know, then I but luckily nothing like that happened. We did come across a sheep which we slaughtered and ate. But yeah, this country of Afghanistan, I hope, I don't want to condemn people. I really hope whatever it is and whatever the Taliban are and whatever the international community's issue with them is, that it's resolved in a manner of rehabilitation and healing. Because that country is, somebody was speaking to me that they don't let girls go to school, and I was like, where would they let girls go? What school? Who's teaching? What are you talking about? Like, that country is the
Yeah,
women.
those guys have probably never been to Afghanistan, so they don't know. But you have
Yeah,
seen it like from
the
what.
women believe what the men say. They believe in that mindset. They support it. They die for it. Yeah.
And yeah, like 2 years since the Taliban took over, and I cannot believe that 4 crore ka mulk still confirms. It's obviously they do enjoy some sort of support, or
It's not some sort.
it
I have been
they
through about
do.
5 or 6 provinces in
Yeah,
Afghanistan. They enjoy popular support,
yeah, and
overwhelming support.
yeah, and the other day, I think I read one of, but उसके अंदर बहुत internal politics भी है, what the supreme leader says and what their government officials are trying to do, but yeah, it's insane. So आप अफगानिस्तान से फिर you make
Then
it
I
back
then I ran. No, then basically what happened was that the Uzbeks who had me, इनका इख्तलाफी मसला हो गया
with the
with the
Afghan Taliban.
Afghan Taliban, and that resulted in a war between them, the Uzbeks and the Afghan Taliban. In that war, um, life worked out for me such that I escaped the Uzbeks but got caught by the Taliban and brought right back to the Uzbeks and judged as an Uzbek. So they didn't believe that I was Pakistani. They believed that
Okay,
I was Uzbek. They said,
okay.
you're living with them, you're with them, so you're them and you were running. Um, so I spent 6 months in an Afghan jail. And then
In
I
a
met
Taliban jail, because at that
in
time
an
Republic.
Afghan Taliban jail in the middle of Afghanistan in a place called Erozgan, which is a province
Yeah,
in
a bit north, I
Afghanistan.
think.
Yeah, a bit north and near Mazar Sharif or something. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. But scary place up north, very, very cold, up in the mountains, ice, and in a proper Afghan jail. And there were about 110 of us who had been sentenced by the Afghan Taliban as prisoners. इसमें अफगान भी थे, पाकिस्तानी भी थे, अरब भी थे, मतलब mix of people that lived in these 3-4 villages that went to war with the Afghan Taliban. And he was there. I met a commander, a young guy, 21, 22, and he helped me and put me on. I had this guy that made up a person, and I want to tell you about the person, but I actually want you to read
Yeah.
the book, the end of it, because it's actually the best part about the entire story. Is Yusuf Britannia, the guy that I created.
Yeah.
And you were asking me about the intricate knowledge that I have of the groups. Like that, I had very intricate knowledge of the roots of how from Europe you come into these areas and how you're recruited and how your training starts and then how you're inducted and how that entire investigation happened because I was with the intelligence of the group and I would see new people come in, how they would induct them, what routes they came from, how they come into these areas, उनको नाम कैसे देते हैं, उनको मुखाबरा कैसे मिलता है, क्लैशनकॉफ कैसे मिलती है, ट्रेनिंग कैसे होती है, कौन कमांडर होता है, किस गांव में जाते हैं, संगत किधर होता है, ये किधर होता है, फिर बिकॉज मैं खुद मीर अली से, दाता खेल से, शवाल से, कोमल से जाबुल वैली पहुंचा था। वो तो रूट मुझे आती थी, और हमारा गाइड भी अफगान तालिबान था। सो आई मेड a compass. I said, my name is Yusuf Britannia. I'm a British fighter. I did Hijrat. I came here to fight. And I am not with anyone. I've just stuck in the wrong place. You don't know who the Uzbeks are and who you guys are. मैं गलत गांव में था। तो मैं जब पाकिस्तान पहुंचा तो ज़रबे अज़ब शुरू हुआ, तो हम तो इधर आ गए। तो बाकी तो मुझे नहीं पता था। Very humble Cinderella story, असल महाजिर। And it worked, by the way. The important thing was to survive the Afghan jail without being caught.
Yeah.
And Yusuf did that with flat. Everybody else was very uncomfortable as well. Nobody else had been to jail. I had spent the last 4 years in jail. So this was very easy to be in a proper facility with proper, like, you know, 6 बजे ये होएगा, 8 बजे ये होएगा, 12 बजे ये होएगा। I was like, this is amazing यार, इधर तो खाना भी मिलता है, टॉयलेट भी यूज कर सकते हो, नहा भी सकते हो, इससे बेहतर आपको क्या चाहिए? बगैर तो मुझे खाना भी नहीं देते थे, मारते भी थे। तो um, so anyways, I spent 6 months almost in that jail, November, December, January, February, 4 months, 4 or 5 months. And then I got back home, man, and that
You
last
made
part,
your way to Balochistan on like lift shift मांग के and like you bike पे किसी
I
के
basically hitchhiked with 9 Taliban, जो who had done their shift होती है ना,
yeah.
अफगानिस्तान में 3 महीने, पाकिस्तान में 6 महीने, अफगानिस्तान में 3 महीने, पाकिस्तान में 6 महीने. So you can only fight there for 3 or 4 months in the winter. Then it's more difficult for the US and for the English, for NATO and the allies to fight. It's harder in the winter, and they understand the mountains and they understand the routes and they disappear in the mountains. And the way that they fight is like crazy. वो तो मतलब एक जैकेट और शलवार कुर्ता और लोडेड गन्स और इस तरह की चीजों के साथ पहाड़, बर्फ वाला पहाड़ चढ़ गए, और हम जो हैं, we need like 30 track suits just to sit over them.
Over
उनको तो
there,
किसी
yeah.
चीज, चप्पल, और बाय द वे सॉक्स के ऊपर वही जो you were saying, क्या पेशावरी चप्पल के
पेशावरी
वर्ड,
चप्पल या
या
कप्तान
वो
चप्पल और पेशावरी
कप्तान
चप्पल
चप्पल, कप्तान
yeah.
चप्पल में पहाड़ चढ़नी है, सही है। तो लाइक ये बड़ी एक यूनिक कॉम है। um,
And you hitchhiked with them to Balochistan मतलब
from
कुचलक का जो एरिया था
Erozgan, from
so so
Erozgan,
that
we
means
went
के
through 4 provinces. Then we entered into Balochistan, and outside, like, and 2 hours outside of Kuchlak, in a small town outside of Kuchlak, not even in Kuchlak, they basically woke up in the morning and they were like, "Aapka Mahajir card kidhar hai?" So I was telling you, they have Mahajir cards, right? Refugee cards. So I was like, I don't have a Mahajir. I was speaking in English, but I have a British accent as well, because मेरी दादी और नानी दोनों अंग्रेज हैं, तो जब मैंने fashionable होना होता है, I have a bit of a
yeah.
British accent, and it works wonderfully with the Taliban. So मैंने कहा कि I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm an English citizen, and I've come here, and I started giving my story to these 9 guys. So they were like, Yusuf, Mahajir card, if you don't have it, you're not coming with us. We'll get caught in Quetta because of you. So we parting goodbye. अब कोई आम आदमी होता है या कोई आम सिचुएशन होती तो तुसी कहंदे मैं हूं किथे, मैंने जाना किथे है, मैं किथे मरा, कौन है, क्यों है, भाजी किथे जा रहे हो?
Yeah.
But I was like, no problem, bye.
So
I couldn't care.
so आपके साथ जो ये 9 लोग थे that means के फाइटिंग सीजन से जब ये वापस तो they are based out of somewhere near Quetta. They're Afghan Muhajirin, but they go to Afghanistan to fight and then they come
They
back.
all have Pakistani refugee cards, man. They're born in Pakistan. You can't catch them. You don't know who's who.
That's
They
yeah. They're part of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
10
They
lakh
come in through the
Afghans.
tribal belt. They
Yeah.
come in through the tribal belt. They come through like, the way that I came from Afghanistan to Pakistan is a book on its own.
You didn't
My
see
dream
any.
one day, my dream one day is to actually, this sounds crazy. I know you're going to think it's crazy. I've never actually said this to anyone. So this is like probably the best part of our podcast, okay,
Yeah.
or our Zoom session. What I want to do is make two documentaries besides a movie or a TV show or whatever. That's all like क्या कहते हैं commercial, right? What
Yeah.
I want to do is make two documentaries. The first one is me visiting Mir Ali and Shawal and narrating my entire story, but in Mir Ali and Shawal, right? And taking you from Lahore
To
into
mirror. Okay.
Mir Ali, and from Mir Ali to Shawal to show you that part of my journey. And then the second one is like a travel diary with like a Taliban, which like I find an official Taliban like who takes my responsibility, and then I go from that prison in Eurozgan, like I find the
To
prison, and
Balochistan.
I go from that prison, and whatever their route was back to Kuchlak, I do that route and make a second movie. So, anyways, the reason that I never said this to anyone is because my family thinks that I'm crazy and that I'll get murdered. But this is like what I really want to do, and
This
this is what
is
I is
yeah.
going to be like something that people would really want to watch as well. Like that's something cool to watch. Like the guy is taking you to Mirali, showing you these places, showing you Miran Shah, showing you Shawal Valley and how I lived in captivity. And then actually a second documentary, which has got nothing to do with my captivity, but actually how I escaped from Afghanistan and like a travel diary, like how to get from a Rozgan to Quetta.
No, this is I feel like आपकी story can मतलब the book itself is there, but ये story ऐसी है कि ये एक किताब cannot do justice to this journey
It
which
was very
basically
difficult.
yeah
ये किताब जो है ये मेरे लिए दुनिया की सबसे मुश्किल चीज थी जो 7 किताबें मेरे पास पड़ी हुई हैं जो मैंने निकाली हैं इससे. It was like
yeah
इतनी बड़ी book
yeah
which I've given you something like this big.
क्योंकि your
So you know,
journey या आपकी जर्नी इज द इंट्रिकेसीज ऑफ द वॉर एंड टेरर राइट कि आपने जैसे कहा कि आपके साथ जो 9 लोग थे दे हैव द रेफ्यूजी कार्ड एज वेल बट वो फिर विंटर्स में जाके लड़ भी रहे हैं फिर वो कोयटा के पास फार्मिंग भी करते होंगे कहीं या कोई दुकान पे बैठते होंगे
I
but whatever like मतलब ये जो Pakistan is always like scapegoated into like आपने like even when the Taliban took over like Pakistan was that state right like you were like this but they don't understand that we host 2 million 3 million of them. Karachi has this whole Afghan colony near Sarabkot where if you go inside there are places okay ये ताजिक वाले हैं ये उज़्बेक हैं ये
yeah, yeah, yeah.
या
Pink.
मतलब ये पख्तून है and there's no police there. They don't pay K Electric K bills, but they get the electricity because if K Electric cuts off their electricity, they're gonna burn the office down. Like it's
No, no. By the way, I think you said 2-3 million. I was going to tell you it's somewhere from 7 to 10
yeah,
million.
it's probably but I think the documented ones are probably like 2 3 million.
हाँ, documented.
And
ना
then the
ये
rest
महाजिर का.
and
बाकी सारे are undocumented and they live on that belt.
yeah
It's a
and
huge belt. It's the camp is like 1 million people.
yeah and for them it's not a border like even the other day someone from the Afghan Taliban's like Qatar office said they to for them to accept this British line as a border is against their belief system. Like Durand line for
Yeah, they
them
don't
can
accept
never be a
boundaries.
border. Yeah,
वो उसको मानते ही नहीं है वो इसलिए तो
like
हमारे साथ और उनके बीच इतनी क्लैशेस हो रही
yeah,
हैं दे डोंट
yeah,
एक्सेप्ट इट वो
like
पूरे ये जो मेरे उज़्बेक कैप्टर्स थे ना मुझे इन्होंने बड़ी एक इंटरेस्टिंग चीज कही थी आई नेवर फॉरगेट इट तो इन्होंने कहा था कि वी ओन यू तुम हमारी कौम हो तुम लोगों को
yeah,
इस्लाम भी हमने सिखाया था तुम लोग तो
yeah,
बुत परस्त थे हम
yeah,
आए थे और हमने तुम्हें मुसलमान बनाया था so I was like what are you talking about he said Babur was an Uzbek.
yeah,
Babur came with 300 horsemen. He was an Uzbek. He invaded you. You were invaded until the Mughals were taken. Bahadur Shah Zafar was removed. You were under Uzbek rule.
yeah. Because our part of the world was always you and I, our
But
generations.
they really felt a divine right over the people
Yeah,
of Pakistan and India, the
yeah,
Uzbeks
yeah.
and the Central Asians. और वो अपने आप को चंगेज खान वो की कौम कहते थे मतलब मैंने
Mongols
तो
and
ऐसे पाकिस्तान नहीं कभी देखे मैं तो अपने आप मैंने जब उन्होंने मुझे ये सारा कुछ कहना हम चंगेज खान की कौम है हम उज़्बेक है और मैंने कहा मेरी भी दादी और नानी अंग्रेज हैं असी भी वो चर्चिल की कौम है ते मजाक नहीं है असी भी तोपा शोपा पाड़ी है they
yeah,
but like they really like I never heard like I have English friends who've always we used to colonize you, make very funny. But I've actually never met
Never.
some demonic madman who has a sense of conquest and entitlement over the people. Yeah, like a
Over the
billion and a
people.
half, 2 billion people. He's
Yeah.
like, we own you.
All the way to Bangladesh. Like, and fascinating part is that their respective countries, Uzbekistan is a modern they have Islam as one of their religions, but you can't. I think a schoolgirl cannot wear a scarf in a school in
They're very
Uzbekistan.
particular. See, they're communist countries, now they're under the eye.
Yeah,
They Central Asia
that's
is
why
still
they are waging a
run.
war on IMU and ETIM and
Yeah,
all these
they
movements in
hate
that
them.
part of the world. And
Look, for all the government problems like communist hai ya Putin hai ya jo bhi hai, they're very clear about one thing. No one will study religion without a state appointed and
yeah,
approved Maulvi. Okay, no,
yeah,
what goes into your head is going to be, we're going to see it. You're not going to get some jihadi garbage going in your
yeah,
head, go blow yourself up and fatwa to kill yourself and beat women and all this.
yeah.
So in that way, they are a progressive country. They are a progressive Muslim country, but their government system is different and their alliances are different. And वो तो होता है, but
Yeah,
in terms of how they manage to keep extremism out of religion and
yeah,
out of society. I mean, कहते हैं कि the Central Asians are the worst of them, very brutal. But कितने यार IMU में 4,000 थे, चेचनियन
yeah.
2,000 होंगे,
5,000,
और
6,000.
10-15 हजार ये मिलिटेंट्स इतने ज्यादा हैं। अरबी तो यार लाख है, अफगानी तो लाखों में है, और पाकिस्तानी भी लाख है। तो ये तो मतलब उन कंट्रीज ने, यू टॉकिंग अबाउट अ रीजन दैट स्प्रेड्स फ्रॉम the borders of Afghanistan all the way to the borders of Europe. Yeah,
Yeah,
Chechenians are considered
yeah.
Europeans almost.
All
So
they're white. They're essentially they're white. Yeah,
even the Uzbeks, yeah, they're fair skinned and they have blonde
yeah.
hair and
They are
colored
like
eyes.
borderline
They're not.
Europeans.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, they don't look like us. I could not believe these people, यार. I couldn't believe that Pakistan में ये लोग रहते हैं और ये पागल हैं और ये militants
Uzbekistan
हैं,
में,
गोरे. हाँ हाँ, मेरे
that
लिए
brings me to
impossible था.
the South Korean with a Yankee accent जो आपने 2-3 दफा mention करा है. Like, how on earth would someone from freaking South Korea end up in मतलब वो.
जमात इस्लामी ने उसको रेडिकलाइज किया. तो कुछ 6 जमाती पहुंचे हुए थे सियोल या कोई
Yeah,
छोटा सेकंड और थर्ड बिगेस्ट शहर
yeah, आपने
कोरिया में.
mention किया
वो
था
लोग भी
कुछ.
इंजीनियरिंग यूनिवर्सिटी में वो बैठे, वो साथ एक ही कमरे में थे, उनके साथ एक साउथ कोरियन घुस गया कमरे में. तो उन्होंने उसको बस इस्लाम सिखाया और उसको
Yeah,
मतलब दे
yeah,
क्या कहते हैं, दावा दावा जैसे
yeah.
करते
Dawa
हैं
and
तो बड़े.
tabligh and
It's a
yeah,
patriotic way of speaking about Islam and बड़ा हक और
yeah,
बातिल की जंग, and it's a good way. I've sat through some of these
yeah,
mind warping exercises. It really takes a true Muslim and a true educated insan to reject this and have your
yeah.
own
Own
brain.
thought process. Yeah.
But the Korean was never heard anything like it. And by the way, जो बेचारे जमाती थे, वो तो फिर भी आके लाहौर अपनी जिंदगियों में
हाँ, वो
अपने
अपनी
काम.
नॉर्मल लाइफ में चले गए होंगे बस.
इसने कहा ये मेरे लिए काफी नहीं है, ये दिस वाज नॉट इनफ, आई नीड टू गो टू अफगानिस्तान एंड फाइट. सो एनीवेज अफगानिस्तान तो नहीं वो पहुंच सका, बट वो यही रूट से इधर आया, उज़्बेकियों ने उसको इंडक्ट कर लिया, हमारे साथ रहो. तो वो उनका मीडिया भी मैनेज करता था, वो एडिटिंग कंप्यूटर सारा ये समझता था. मीडिया इज अ बिग पार्ट ऑफ द these
Yeah,
terrorist,
their propaganda
their
and
propaganda, their videos, their उनके जो फतवों की और उनके जो दावा की videos होती हैं, they put them, they publish them everywhere. Dark web पे these guys really operate on the dark web.
yeah,
So, but anyways, this is the Korea. And then they were talking to my mother, so he wanted to give it style. He wanted to give the negotiation style. He wanted to throw the ISI off. So got the Korean, because the Korean who spoke the best English in the group.
yeah. आप इनसे उर्दू में even with the Uzbeks, you
मैं
speak
अपने
English?
किडनैपर से उर्दू में बात करता था,
They knew
because वो
some Urdu,
तो
I think.
कराची के मदरसे का पढ़ा हुआ था, तो उसकी उर्दू तो मेरे से बहुत बेहतर थी. उसको तो
अच्छा.
मतलब वो तो इतनी हाई लेवल उर्दू बोलता था कि शुक्र है मेरे दादा और मेरे वालिद साहब दुनिया में नहीं है, वरना वो कहते यार तुम्हें तो शर्म से डूब मरना चाहिए कि एक उज़्बेक तुमसे इतनी बेहतर उर्दू बोलता है, और हम तो शायर और राइटर थे यार. तो वो उसकी
Yeah,
उर्दू वाज इम्पेक्केबल. वो उसकी शादी भी एक उर्दू स्पीकिंग महाजिर, वो क्या कहते हैं, कोई
Mahajir,
टर्म है कराची,
Mahajir,
महाजिर,
yeah, Mahajir,
बट ये
Karachi.
बंगाली ओरिजिन के थे. सो ये बंगाली ओरिजिन
अच्छा,
है, ये इंडियन ओरिजिन, मतलब हिंदू, वो क्या है यार, इंडियन, एक
या
इंडियन साइड के महाजिर होते हैं,
या उर्दू
एक
स्पीकिंग होते हैं जो ज्यादातर लखनऊ या यूपी
वेरी
वगैरह
रेसिस्ट
में।
बाय द वे।
नहीं नहीं नहीं,
मेरी एक
इट्स
दोस्त है जो मुझे कहा था कि बड़ा ही रेसिस्ट तरीका है हमारे बारे में
it's
बात करने का,
it's it's
बट आई
it's
डोंट नो हाउ एल्स
fine.
टू एक्सप्लेन कि उसने
It's
कहाँ
our,
से ये
yeah.
हिज उर्दू वोकैबुलरी वाज, मतलब वो उर्दू में दावत देता था, वो पाकिस्तानियों को माइंड रैप, मतलब मैनिपुलेट करता था। और जो इनकी लाहौर की टीम थी, ये इसने खुद बनाई थी, ये लाइक माइंडेड लोग नहीं थे, ये यंग लड़के थे, यूनिवर्सिटी के इंजीनियर थे, लॉयर्स थे, पढ़े लिखे बंदे थे, जिनको शायद हो, लाइक आई सेड, हम कंजर्वेटिव लोग हैं, और कभी कभार जब आप डाउन हो जाते हो जिंदगी में, यू रिलाई ऑन अल्लाह अ
You
लिटिल
you
बिट
you
मोर।
you
इन
you
लड़कों को उन वक्त पे पकड़ा था, और इनका कंप्लीटली इसने माइंड मैनिपुलेट किया, इनको गंद और फिल्थ इनके दिमाग में डाली, और मेन चीज पैसा था, मेन चीज पैसे की लालच थी। और उसने
where do they get the money? जैसे आपने कहा कि is it
किडनैपिंग
like
यार, मुझे उन्होंने
kidnapping?
60, पता नहीं $60 million के लिए किडनैप किया था। मेरे से
That's
पहले इन्होंने एक बंदे को किडनैप किया था, जो लिबर्टी में, या सॉरी, लिबर्ट मेन बुलेवार्ड में रहता था। इसकी शहर के अंदर बादाम की दुकान थी, मतलब ड्राई फ्रूट्स, एंड ही वाज अ करोड़पति। ओके, he paid 10 crore rupees to them like in 3 months and got out. Just think about it. उसकी
that's
बस एक बादाम की दुकान थी।
dry fruits.
ब्रो, जब इनके पास कोई बंदा फंस जाता है ना, जब ये कहते हैं कितना दोगे घर जाने के लिए, वो आपको 4 कौड़े मारते हैं, और आपको अपनी नेटवर्थ हमेशा पता है। आपके बाप के पास कितना पैसा है, आपकी माँ के पास कितना पैसा है, और गिन गुन के कितना हो सकता है। वो आपसे हिस्सा नहीं मांगते, पूरा मांगते हैं। उस वक्त आपकी जान की बात होती है। तो
आपके
अगर
वो मतलब आपके केस में was it the ransom or was it कि they wanted to free their captives
both,
by the
they had
Pakistanis?
25 of the highest ranking militants, and they had a $65 million ransom on me. I think,
65
by the way,
million dollars.
a lot of people say that it's the highest ransom ever asked
हाँ,
of a Pakistani. I think it's the highest ransom ever asked, by the
60
way, of
million
anyone.
dollars वो वजीरिस्तान में 60
Yeah.
मिलियन डॉलर के करेंगे क्या मतलब वो?
बाय द वे, जाके देखो उसामा बिन लादेन और मुल्ला उमर की क्या इन्होंने मांगी है। इनके लिए इतना पैसा नहीं मांगा जितना मेरे लिए मांगा। मतलब
Yeah,
मैं तो सबसे टॉप टेररिस्ट की, मतलब टेररिस्ट नहीं, एक टेररिस्ट लिस्ट है, और फिर एक हम लोगों की लिस्ट है, और उसमें मैं टॉप पे।
yeah, I think that's just
बट ये
uh
एक डेथ सेंटेंस होता है ना, दिस इज उस,
yeah.
अभी तो मैं हंसता हूँ और बड़ा मैं, मतलब आई से माय नेट वर्थ इज व्हाट दे वांटेड, बट उस वक्त इट्स लाइक अ डेथ सेंटेंस यार।
Yeah, that's
जब
true.
आपको कोई कहता है ना, आई वांट $65 million फॉर योर लाइफ, तो यू लिविंग ऑन borrowed टाइम।
That's just that's just insane. बस एंड की तरफ चलते हैं. We're almost at the 1 hour 30 minute mark. Thank you so much for your time अभी तक as well.
नो मैन,
अगर
I had a
पाकिस्तान में भी
great
I think
time with
it's
you.
10 बज गए होंगे. You're like 10:06 right in Pakistan. But I think towards the end जो कुछ questions मुझे बस end में थे कि what does the future look like for you? Like you're 39, you're living in Lahore, you have a family, you're a
A
businessman.
very young guy. What does this mean? The future?
No,
You
no,
think
no, no,
I'm going to be on a
मतलब
ventilator now and dying
no,
on
no,
39?
no,
Man, I've
no,
got
no,
my whole
no.
life
Like,
ahead.
नहीं, but like उस तरह नहीं.
I'm
But
joking.
you have your day job and everything. But with this book, do we see another book coming? I don't know. Do we see someone from Netflix calling you up? Okay, dude, I want to make something about are you
Yeah,
pursuing art
it's a lot
forms?
of hard work.
Yeah.
The thing is, I never thought that I could even do any of this. I had a very boring, very fun, boring job, but very boring. It just requires the
I
same
understand.
office, same routine, same shit every day.
Yeah, I
But
understand.
Allah, मेरा बाप कहता था, तुम लोग इतने नाशुक्र हो, इंडिया तुम लोगों से इसलिए इतना आगे है क्योंकि उनकी वो जो छोटी पान की दुकान होती है, जब वो उधर सुबह जाते हैं, वो भगवान का अपना पूरा करके दुकान खोलते हैं। तुम लोग तो जाने से पहले ही 6 गालियां दे देते हो, अल्लाह का शुक्र अदा किया करो। तो वो तो हम हैं ही इतने नाशुक्र। आई कीप सेइंग बोरिंग डेस्क जॉब, बट दैट desk and chair has given me everything in this life. Um, but the truth is that this book and this kidnapping, unfortunately, is the best thing that ever happened to me in
Yeah.
terms of all these amazing doors and opportunities that have opened for
Because
me. So
मुझे
I
याद है.
really want to write a second book. Sorry, I really want to write a second
जी
book
जी.
about my
Yeah.
life. And I don't know if somebody will call me from Netflix, but I'm working really, really hard so that even
this is definitely मतलब I shouldn't be like reducing reductionist lens हो जाएगा कि मैं इसको एक Netflix वो बोल दूं, but this is definitely something Netflix should tell. It's the story.
yeah.
It's a
नहीं, I hope
fascinating
so.
story. It's a क्योंकि you mentioned बल्कि मुझे उस पर आना था, but I saw the Daniel Pearl film with like Adnan Siddiqui and Angelina Jolie, and by the way, like if you have time, Daniel Pearl was picked up from our club in Karachi Gymkhana. It's like 2 minutes away. There's this village restaurant. उसके बाहर से Daniel Pearl को उठाया था. एंड टू दिस डे जब मैं उस जगह से गुजरता हूँ, सो आई नो कि डैनियल पर्ल को इधर से उठाया था, लाइक क्लब रोड कराची से. एंड यू मेंशन कि आपने दुबई से लाहौर की फ्लाइट में आपने माइटी हार्ट देखी, एंड लाइक द डे आफ्टर आपके साथ ही हुआ. बट आपकी स्टोरी और डैनियल पर्ल की स्टोरी में फर्क ये है कि डैनियल पर्ल वाज दिस, it does come in, right, like a white guy picked up in like broad daylight in Karachi, and
No
like
one deserves it. No
and
one
and
deserves.
and आपके साथ जो हुआ,
No,
like
I, I'll tell you, yeah. I swear to God, I've suffered so much. I'm a fair-skinned brown man, um, and I've suffered so much in my life because of the color of my skin and the nationality on my passport and the religion that I love and I was born into. I just, I, and having been through my experience, there was a wonderful man called Warren Weinstein who was drawn while I was there, and he was kidnapped a few days before me. And I swear to God, yeah, I just, no one deserves this. Yeah. Daniel Pearl, and I saw the movie. I couldn't believe that this would happen to me 2 days later. But I have my still this day. I have this thing for his, like this love, empathy. I don't know what it is. Connection with his family, especially
I
with his,
understand. And even
with his wife. It's just the worst thing that can happen to a family. And for a long
and
time, I thought I'd be a Daniel for my family, and that's a guilt, by the way. And because to be so helpless in your own pain, and then to know that the ending of this pain will be the beginning of so much pain for other people that you love so much is the most difficult way to spend your time,
नहीं,
especially
and
with
the
these
fact
people.
that his like the group behind Daniel Pearl is still in, like, at least one of them, like the very, I'm forgetting the name, but he's in central
Educated
jail.
from the London School of
Yeah.
Economics, by the way.
I think he was the one in Central Jail Karachi who also did a prank call to
निकल
us.
गया.
अब तो शायद is he नहीं, I think उसकी release को challenge कर दिया है state. I'm not
Oh,
sure though,
okay.
but he was the one who also made a call to Asif Ali Sardari somehow to the president's office. I think I heard it somewhere, but here was a call that we're speaking. I don't know. I think मैंने शायद सुना होगा, but then again, yeah, it's we have a lot of. By the way, what happened? Like after you came back, was there any follow up on the group? Like because operations
Yeah,
were
the
चल
group
रहे
was all killed by the Afghan Taliban.
थे. Okay.
They were all murdered. They killed. They didn't leave man, woman, or child. They killed ruthlessly because वो ब्यात के ऊपर इशू था ना. उन्होंने तालिबान
Mm.
को delegitimize कर दिया ISIS को ब्यात देके. So it was a bloodbath. Besides all the war that I suffered, what the Taliban did to the Uzbeks was one of the, by the way, the most brutal things that I've ever seen, and I was with very brutal people. But उन्होंने तो औरत बच्चे मर्द में किसी में फर्क नहीं किया, उन्होंने execute किया उनको हजारों में. और and even the people that took pity on me, that helped me, that उन्होंने किसी को नहीं छोड़ा. उन्होंने वो और औरतों को भी मारा. मेरी कहानी में आप पढ़ोगे about आया जान, who was my kidnapper's mother-in-law, who actually saved my life and stopped my torture, um,
These guys used to
and they
live with
killed
their
her.
families. ये families के साथ वहाँ पे रहते थे,
Yeah,
like.
yeah, they all married. उनके बच्चे थे, उनकी माएँ थी, उनकी पूरी पूरी families 3-4 generations settled there. And
In like
ये
nearly
95 96 में अफगानिस्तान आए थे. 13 साल की उम्र पे उधर लड़की की शादी कराते हैं. 17 साल बच्चा होता है. 17 साल का होता है जब पहली शादी होती है, दूसरी तो फिर वो जब मरता है, क्या उम्र होती है दूसरे मर्द की, वो देखते नहीं है। बट जस्ट खुद सोचो कितनी जनरेशन निकल जाती है 17 और 13 साल की जब आप शादियां करना शुरू।
And it's like an endless अब मतलब ठीक है, like even if like the war has officially ended in Afghanistan, but I never get even in this day and age, मतलब किसी को प्रोफाइल नहीं करना चाहिए, but those people, for the sake of their tribal rivalries and their interpretation of religion, they're willing to हर चीज को मतलब just family life, livelihood.
They, they've buried too many people to care about that now. We're talking about
And it's
hundreds of thousands of bodies that nobody's counted, hundreds and thousands of bodies that you've counted, hundreds and thousands of bodies that you don't know about over generations, over 30, 40 years of war. This region has been bombed. You know, I was telling someone yesterday, I was doing an interview, and I said, when I was driving into Afghanistan, we live in Pakistan, so we understand mountains and we understand hills. Okay, mountain is a mountain and a hill is a hill. I wasn't driving on a hill, I was on a mountain range. And as I was driving from the side of the mountain, his side say you could see the other mountain, right? And you know how they're like this, but this was like curved inside. One side of the mountain was curved inside because it had been bombed. You've seen mountains, right? Can you imagine in a
yeah,
mountain,
yeah,
one side
it's
is
insane.
got like a has like a thing like this, itni bombing hui hai.
That's just
I
insane.
mean, it's a god forsaken, for people that are fighting for God, it's really a god forsaken country. It's
Yeah,
like God literally just said,
it's
you
just
know,
uh, uh yeah, it's just but yeah,
and
on
when
that.
you look at an Afghan child or man, you can see the war.
Yeah,
You
you
can
can.
see a 3, 4 year old child, and his hands, like you see my hands, his hands are not like this. Okay, they're his color from here is like me, and here it's black and like leather, and his feet are the same.
It's
And
just
his father's, face is all the sun has burnt like the color, and like it's so rock looking, and their eyes are black from here from years of just they, they're really like it's a very and when an Afghan Taliban or one of these militants sits in front of you with power, it's like a fucking sorry, it's sorry
nahin,
about that,
it's fine. It's
but
fine.
it's like a you know a lion who's hungry, and you're like tied up in front of him in a small cell, and
That's
they'll take you, it's like it's a fear that they put inside you. Because hum log jo bhi hai na, like you grow up in
I think
Lahore, and
we are calmer, softer people all over the country. I think.
we are, but like like पठान थोड़े से कहते हैं इस तरह है, और लाहौर में भी बड़ी लड़ाइयाँ होती हैं और
Yeah.
बड़े कूल हैं और सारे, but
But yeah, we're generally
no
like
way, this
what
is
we
like
yeah, like you can't compare yourself to because obviously you're talking about people jinki teen generations have been through 40 years of two superpowers just entering their country. But on that note, I think even towards the end, uh 15th August ko, like when the whole Afghan thing happened, and you're someone who's been inside there, literally inside, from the inside, right? And what's your take on what do you think about Afghanistan? Like 2 years down the line, no legitimacy, no one's talking to them. Even we are not talking to them. Like compared to like what we were told कि हम तो बहुत ही कोई pro हैं उनके. But their decision making and the way they're trying to like consolidate their power is, I personally, like even as a political scientist, I think that's like not pragmatic at all. That's like just foolishness, right? Like even after all these years.
what the problem with them is, they don't really care what any of us think.
Yeah.
And the worst part about the problem is that the people who came to solve it left,
And created more mess, like
like a
they're like
mess of a portion that you can't imagine.
yeah.
You
And
removed them and bombed them for 20 years. You killed generations of their people. And then you left. And now you want them to, like, I don't think they care that no one is talking.
Yeah.
You know
But
what I mean?
yeah, they like if you see the Afghan society now, you meet Afghans here and everyone like the society
ये तो
inherently
है
has
वो
changed.
लोग जो भाग गए हैं, जो
Yeah.
got out. These are refugees. They
But
got out.
even
They
in like modern day, if you look at their YouTube channels and their Twitter and like even people within Afghanistan are making sense, are talking. But ये जो पूरा जो old guard है of the people, जो mothership, like I remember this very famous Pakistani political scientist, he calls them the Taliban mothership. But I don't know how many years it would take for them to return to
No, I
being.
can tell you how. I mean, look, if you want to get rid of extremism, it's very simple. It requires a lot of money
Yeah,
and no corruption. It
yeah,
requires the money to go into education, into
infrastructure.
rehabilitation,
Yeah,
infrastructure, integration
yeah,
in normal society. And what happens is that with time, when you do this, and Europe is
it
the most fantastic example
yeah.
because the Italians were fascists and the Germans were fascists and the Turks were fascists and half of Europe was Austrians and Hungarians were fascists and they joined, Hitler. They say we were annexed, but it seemed
Yeah,
like they were
it's
pretty
they
much
did.
open to it.
They yeah.
So, Europe suffered fascism and they killed millions and millions of people
Yeah.
fighting fascism. And then the first war didn't work out. And in the second
They
war, what they did was they
fought
changed their
again.
approach and they invested in infrastructure and they invested in those societies and education and integrating them back. They integrated the Japanese into the financial market. Can you imagine if Afghanistan was Japan? Because the world took interest in these people. And yes,
Yeah.
the Taliban are the worst, but then you work with the second generation, and then you work with the third
Third
generation,
generation and
fourth generation, and
and
then the fifth generation.
I feel like मुझे बहुत सारे लोग कहते हैं कि Afghanistan is just like a lost cause, but then I like if you look at Arab history, Arabs were like in the 30s and the 40s, and Arabs were literally, not to offend any Arab watching this, but they were
90s.
the
90s.
source
You should
of
come up to the 90s.
yeah, the
You should
source
come
of
up to
Wahhabism and
2000s.
yeah, like 2020, 2021, 2019, I think, when women got the official permission to drive in Saudi Arabia. And uh, if the Arab world
Saudi
can
Arabia
change,
to is Farak. But
yeah,
even Dubai, which is the most
Dubai,
advanced,
yeah,
is 2000 ke baad.
yeah,
Right? Before that, it was nothing. It was empty.
and
All the modern laws, all the modern buildings, all the society, all the
everything.
fun. This has all come now. It's come in the
It
last
took them
23 years.
like it took them like 30, 40, 50 years to realize that like modern education and infrastructure and laws and civil liberties. And I hope like we can end on this note that maybe like people who kidnapped you, their third or fourth generation might not end up doing the same thing with anyone else in Pakistan or say like anyone else, like anywhere in the world. Like I feel like
We
it's
have we have to work very hard as a people, as a country, and the international community has to work very hard to ensure that because actually what you do is when you kill someone's parents, then you send them on a
yeah,
war path, and when you kill them, you send their children. And when hate is installed over three generations, and one child can say, "My father, my brother, my mamu, my chacha, my grandfather, my
everyone
grandfather's
was killed.
brothers, my dada, my great grandfather, his brothers, and my great great grandfather, and all his brothers were all killed by the Americans." And
It's very hard
that's
for
very hard, right?
it's
But
and
really, like again, I tell you that Europe is the best example.
exactly
It is a living example of human
like
integration.
100 years ago, where I'm sitting right now was under Nazi control. Like my building has वो जो खंडकें बनती थी for the Jews to like when they used to come and check whether you're like housing a Jew. I'm living in that building right now, and you could feel it that these guys turned, let alone a chapter, these guys turned like an encyclopedia over and like started like something else. And like you're an example of that as well, like still living in Pakistan, and you turned a chapter, let's say again a book in your life maybe. But yeah, I think on this note we can
But you
end.
know,
Yeah,
I want to tell you something before I go. One of the reasons that they couldn't get to me, that they couldn't, um, you know,
yeah,
turn my head, because you have to understand, I was also desperate, and I was also at the lowest point in my life. And if they had tried to uh, manipulate me, I was very open to it because of my circumstances. right? I would much rather be a militant than be dead. Most people would rather be militants than be dead. But the reason I could never understand anything they said is because, it had nothing to do with anything except that my mother is educated. It's not even my father. It's that my mother was educated and that she had a moral compass and that she worked and that she had values that she had instilled in me. And one of those values was you can never kill anyone, you can never steal, you can never lie. It doesn't
Exactly.
matter how desperate you get. You know what I mean? And sometimes we take this for a little bit, like we take it for granted, values that our parents and so on. But an educated woman who can work and contribute to a household, right? Her child cannot be made into a extremist, manipulated militant. Like it's impossible. And so
That's
they could preach as much as they like, but they'll never get me to put on a suicide vest and blow myself up. That's why also when I studied Islam through their perspective, I never saw what they were talking about. And I could actually counter it on an intellectual level. Like a small thing. I'll give you a really small example. Like they said movies haram hai. So I said, क्यों? वो तस्वीरें मना है, बंद है. So I said, what are you talking about? तस्वीरें मना है? क्यों मना है तस्वीरें? बस अल्लाह ने कहा मना. मैंने कहा अल्लाह ने ये इसलिए नहीं कहा तस्वीरें मना. लोग बुतों की तस्वीरें बनाते हैं, इंसानों की तस्वीरें बनाते हैं और उनको उनको वर्शिप करते हैं, उनको दीन बना, उनको अपना मजहब बना देते हैं. कल्ट जो हम कहते हैं, कल्ट प्रॉब्लम, राइट? We are inclined, we as a creation, somehow we always worship humans and stones and graves and all kinds of sun and moon and stars, right? So that's why figure drawing and it's looked down upon, right? And said mat karo because you'll be inclined towards idol worship. But what do you think writing is? It's a form of storytelling. Did they have movie cameras back then? Because if they had a movie camera, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I really think that it would have been the entire text instead of having text. Do you write today or do you just like send a voice note?
I write like.
Oh, I mean, but I'm talking about convenience. If you have to
I'm
navigate
still
something.
I'm still a texting person, but a lot of people have like switched over like voice note and like directly calling.
No, not just a not just a voice note, but just think of it like a video note. Like what we're doing right now is a Zoom call, right? If I have some knowledge and I want to impart it to you, I'm doing it through Zoom. It's not haram. And in the same way, as long as you're not worshipping what you're doing as an art form, if it's information, if it's a documentary, if it's something about the Quran, if it's literature, it's not haram.
Anything, it's
So what is the Quran? It is the story of creation. It is a story of faith and how our religion came into being, and it is told through a medium which is a book, right? Calligraphy देखिए, it's also an art form.
It's
Art
beautiful.
is not haram.
It's just so, like and you know what, मतलब ये जो सारा argument देते हैं, this particular like Wahhabi school of thought, you see these guys on TV now, like you see these guys on podcasts now, like even the Afghan Taliban, like press conferences, Tolo news पर आके रोज रात में talk shows.
By the way, I want to do a podcast with the Afghan Taliban as well. I think that would be pretty cool.
Like maybe like their political office, or like maybe like from somewhere like Sohail Shaheen or someone like that. But I feel like how these guys were the ones who banned YouTube in Pakistan, and now these guys are making money off YouTube channels. Like if you look at like the internet, you were up. Were you in captivity?
I was there when YouTube was banned. YouTube has been banned since I've been back as well.
मतलब 20, I think PMLN की government ने आकर, the information minister, 2015, end of 2015, they unbanned YouTube. But you tell someone that YouTube was banned in your country and they're like, dude, bhai, tu, like, why? And this whole idea of censoring or censuring internet over something you don't agree with, like, but that's the thing, right? Like how evolution works. Like I'm a huge believer in evolution, and the same guys who wanted YouTube to be banned have like 300
are using it to make money. Yeah.
are using it to what happened with loudspeaker, what happened with printing press and the Ottomans, right? उन्होंने पहले ban करी and then they kind of went like, okay, this is a thing to make money, right? So again, like it's all economic. If
I
these
mean,
guys,
look, man, the Pope told Galileo that the world is
yeah,
flat and that
yeah,
he's crazy. And then he
yeah,
said, "You're right, I am." And you know, they
and
said that we
yeah,
had a divine thing, and God has told us that the earth is flat. And then it was the most difficult thing for the Catholic Church to admit that the earth is unfortunately not
even
flat.
like it might be controversial, but the Pope today is close to like even endorsing like same-sex relationships to some extent, which is very common in Europe. बट 500 साल पहले अगर पोप को कोई बोलता सेम से, वो मार देते उसको, मतलब वो कहते भाई ये तो
It's called
मतलब
the
ये तो,
Spanish Inquisition.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
I just saw a movie where they said the Spanish Inquisition happened because the Pope at the time was possessed by the devil. So, you know,
exactly right,
propaganda
and
works in all ways.
yeah,
Maybe the
it's
Afghan Taliban can say that one day.
maybe I don't know 100 years later, like what the
I'll get
Europe
into a
is.
lot of trouble saying that.
Yeah, but like yeah that too, but जो आज यूरोप में हो रहा है, even India next door, the Supreme Court might be is close to, they have already decriminalized same sex relationships, but मैं हमेशा लोगों को कहता हूँ कि a lot of things are bound to happen eventually, like for 100 years ago the Germans were fighting with the world, and now they're like this beacon of liberalism and plurality and absolute freedoms and everything, but yeah, I
Well,
think
the Japanese, the
the
Japanese are also
Japanese
the people
the
for,
Japanese
you
were
know, the
like
best.
Japanese are like crazy people. Like they're like and now they're the living embodiment of like progress and technology and advancement, and like how much a human mind can accomplish. Even the Dutch, what the Dutch did with the Indonesians and the Surinamese and people, and now the Dutch, like I feel like the Dutch relatively are the freest people even within Europe, like their mindset, like how open they are about things, and you could feel it like Pakistan से आके तो यहाँ आके तो you're like dude, this is like a multiverse, like ये कोई और dimension है, this is not the world I grew up in. And yeah, but I think on this note, like this whole like we're almost at the 2 hour mark now, and I think whoever is listening to this get some hope. And even whatever like हमारे पाकिस्तान में जैसे भी हालात हैं like the world over, I think it's great that to someone like you who told the story about hope and about starting a new life, like you mentioned it like as 2.0, but I feel like I hope people read the book. It's called Lost to the World, Memoir of Faith, Family, and 5 Years in Terrorist Captivity by Shahbaz
It's a
Taseer.
difficult book, but it's a
It's
fun book. I mean,
it's a
I
fun
wrote
book,
it
and
right,
I
but
yeah, and yeah, that's about it. Anything you would like to end before we close? This has been a great
no, I
session.
thank you. Yeah, I had a great time, and the time just went like that. But
Yeah,
thank you for having me, and it was
no
wonderful
worries,
to meet, talk to you, and such a privilege to come on. Yeah, and thank
no
you for
worries,
having me.
no
This is
worries,
very,
no worries.
you were very kind and in your introduction and in the conversation. So thank you. Yeah,
Great,
I really appreciate it, and I
great.
wish you the best luck
Thank you.
on your podcast and your studies. And if you're ever in Lahore, connect.
Definitely,
You know,
I wanted to say that if
you
I'm
have
ever in
my
Lahore,
email, you have my number.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
when you're
definitely,
here, my house is
great,
your house. Come over
yeah,
and we'll have a cup of chai.
yeah, definitely. Thank you everyone for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please do. And yeah, that's about it. Thank you.